You've been walking for days. Your body aches. You're dripping with sweat from the heat of the sun bearing down overhead, and yet you're wrapped up in layers upon layers of clothing. Even your face is covered, and you're wearing thick black goggles so that not a single centimeter of your body is exposed. Your journey has been long, and you feel like you might die from exhaustion or from overheating due to these multiple layers of clothes. But dying is better than being exposed. You saw it happen when your entire team changed. The light cannot be trusted, not even for a fraction of a second. It's been like this for years. You've learned and survived through painful experience. Many of those you used to know cannot say the same. You've been alone for so long. You might have given up all hope if it wasn't for the distress signal coming from a nearby SCP Foundation containment facility, Site 46. Any kind of survivors would be better than nothing, no matter what kind of sorry shape they were in, as long as they were still human. You find your way to an opening in the side of a mountain and slide into the cave, hoping you weren't spotted. The whole world is crawling with those things now. You can't let yourself be seen. As you trudge down the cave towards the entrance, you see what looks like a huge black snail trail splattered on the ground, leading into the facility. You try to avoid it and press on. You don't even need a key card to enter. The door has been left ajar. The facility reeks of those things, but you can't see any of them. You just hope they've moved on and left some human survivors in their wake. The place looks abandoned. Every step you take echoes through the empty halls. When you find that the elevator's out, you take the stairs all the way down to level B5, Keter Containment. Lucky for you, it seems all the cells are empty now. The horrors that were kept inside of them have all long since flown the coop. You keep following that slimy black trail until you find an abandoned office. There are no people here anymore. Just a broken barricade, some empty medicine bottles, and a bucket that the people inside the office had apparently been using as a toilet. You breathe a sigh of disappointment at finding no one alive here, but you're at least relieved to be out of the sun. You can finally remove your jacket and head wrap. With your uncovered eyes, you notice that a nearby computer terminal is still powered up. You sit down at the desk and turn on the monitor. Because of the emergency procedures put into place in a K-class scenario like this, safeguards no longer apply. You can access all the information you need, up to and including finding out what actually happened. In the dull glow of a nearby emergency light, you see a dark shape slumping through the halls in shadow. You tense up, then exhale as it slithers off into an adjoining hall. You're safe, for now. The terminal has finally loaded and authenticated your access. You're staring at the file for SD Locke's proposal for SCP-001 when day breaks. It's the only name you can give the apocalypse your world is currently experiencing. This is one of the only anomalies in the entire history of the SCP Foundation to be given the Apollyon Containment class, meaning containment is truly impossible. SCP-001 is the most dangerous enemy that the Foundation and planet Earth has ever faced. It's always been the principle of the SCP Foundation to battle in the dark so that the civilian world can thrive in the light. But now the light has become the enemy. Anyone exposed to any amount of sunlight for even the briefest period of time is subjected to the effects of SCP-001, and those effects are beyond horrifying. The SCP Foundation Administrator released an urgent memo telling Foundation personnel to make their way to Site-19 at all costs, because they need all the help they can get. Those exposed to SCP-001 in the process are no longer considered human. Their new designation is SCP-001-A. These new entities are to be avoided at all costs. But in case of emergencies, the Administrator says it is permitted to cut off parts of your transformed comrades and eat them to avoid starvation. No attempt should be made to kill them, since you won't succeed. You'll just put yourself at risk. When the sun changed and became SCP-001, it instantly affected 6.8 billion innocent people. The second the visible light touched them, whether it was from the sun itself or even reflected off the moon, their bodies liquefied, melting like candle wax into puddles of living gelatinous slime. This effect isn't isolated to humans either. Any biological entity exposed to sunlight immediately underwent the same irreversible melting process into SCP-001-A, and the horror had only just begun. People transformed into SCP-001-A will remain shades of their former intelligence and personality. They may even try to will their new gooey mass into a shape resembling their original form. However, these individuals will lose their sense of self if they come into contact with other instances of SCP-001-A. When they come together, 001-A instances will bond on a molecular level, wading up into horrific giant blobs with only one purpose: integrating more matter into their bodies. That's why they have to be avoided at all costs. You continue to search the computer terminal for answers. Perhaps there was some kind of contingency plan put in place for this, some way to reverse the effects, or at least escape the nightmare Earth has become. Instead, you find a series of attachments linked to the SCP-001 file, detailing what seems to be the last days of the people who barricaded themselves in the facility. Most prominent among these were researcher Dr. Logan Igata, her partner Ari, a security officer named Commander Anad, and a few others. Dr. Igata had locked herself in the office, where she recorded her final messages to the world. In the first audio log, Dr. Igata and her companions seemed afraid, but hopeful that there may be some way out of this situation. Dr. Igata reported that most of the workers at the facility were transformed during the initial event. Their melted bodies had fused outside the facility, and now they were trying to bust their way back in. The defenses had held so far though, and they seemed confident they would hold long enough for them to figure out a way to escape this awful situation. You open the second attachment, an incident report, and realize things may not have been as hopeful as Dr. Igata let on. She reported hearing the huge mass of melted creatures hammering on the door outside again, begging for them to come out and experience the sun with them. They wanted desperately to add to their ever-growing biomass. In order to experiment with what exactly would happen, they sent out one of their few remaining D-classes wearing a full protective suit. He didn't last long. The huge creature grabbed him with tentacles made of reconstituted flesh. It began ripping off his protective suit as he screamed for mercy. It was a monster made of dozens of people and animals. He could never overpower it. The second the sun touched his skin, he melted away and was absorbed by the great mass holding him in place. Guns were ineffective against these SCP-001-A super entities. Fire would do no good. It seemed that extremely low temperatures were the only way to slow the immense blobs down. And even then, not permanently. There was one ray of light in the darkness. The site director had a secret tunnel underneath his office, connected to a tram that could hopefully take them directly to Site-19 without risk of SCP-001 exposure. It was a good plan, and by far the best option they had available to them. But the best plans often don't work in practice. You open the next attachment on the terminal. This time, it's a video feed. You can actually see Dr. Logan Igata, and she looks harrowed by what she's experienced. As it turns out, while the others, including her partner Ari, attempted to escape through the tunnel, something had happened. Dr. Igata heard Ari's voice over her radio, but there was something wrong with it. It was too low, too guttural, and filled with gurgles. SCP-001 had gotten her. She was changed. The monster from above had crawled in through the ceiling. It had taken them, all of them, and converted them into something less than human. Any hope of escape now seemed gone. Ari told Dr. Igata that it would be fine, that it was such a bright, beautiful, sunny day outside, and she was wasting it locked up inside that office. She tormented Dr. Igata with their shared memories of picnics in the park on sunny days in the past. The monster with Ari's voice did everything it could to try to convince Dr. Igata to give up and join them, but she wasn't ready to go just yet. You look away from the screen when you hear a sound in the corner. You see a dark puddle of some unknown substance and then some skeletal hands rising out of it. The hands are pulling themselves out of the puddle, followed by a skeletal face covered in matted hair. You have to stop yourself from screaming until a flash from a nearby security light makes the figure disappear. It's a normal puddle once again. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You open the next attachment, another video, and see that Dr. Igata's condition has deteriorated. She looked pale, frantic, and thin. She was using a knife to draw her own blood onto a piece of blood-stained parchment covered in strange symbols. Igata ranted about her theory. What if 001 took the minds and bodies of its victims, but not their souls? Through performing some kind of arcane blood ritual, she hoped to at least rescue and keep the soul of Ari, even if her mind and body were lost. You open the next attachment. It seemed that Agata's ritual worked, but not in the way she hoped. The twisted soul of Ari, driven mad by SCP-001, had taken over the file. It begins corrupting the text of the SCP-001 file into crazy ranting about how futile it is to fight. It then cuts to an even more frightening video feed. Dr. Igata, in her sleep, tossing and turning in a makeshift bed in the corner of her office. The camera approaches her, in first person, and lingers over her sleeping body. An oily skeletal hand reaches past the camera and runs its fingers through Dr. Igata's hair. It's that exact same hand you saw reaching out of that black puddle earlier. You must have seen Ari's lingering spirit. With a lump in your throat, you open the next attachment and watch the video. You see Dr. Igata, now truly broken. She'd been haunted by Ari's demonic spirit for a long time now, and it has clearly taken its toll. She is waving around a handgun while she speaks. She now believes there is only one way to escape, but not like this. She doesn't want the gun to draw attention to her body. She doesn't want to become part of that mass, even if she is dead. She opens a drawer on her desk she's recording at and places the gun inside. Dr. Igata then apologizes to her loved ones who are likely long since dead or assimilated and turns off the recording for the last time. In that moment, you realize there's a single drawer in the desk in front of you. When you reach forward and open it, you see the same handgun Dr. Igata was holding is laying inside. You pick it up and study it, weighing your options. Perhaps there truly is no other way out. Then you see an update on the file. One more attachment has been added while you were studying the gun. You feel your heart pounding in your chest as you reach forward and open the attachment. The text has been changed entirely. The file on SCP-001 is now a poem, an ode to the sun and to ultimate togetherness. Then a video file spontaneously opens itself on the screen. It's a video of you, shot from behind. You see those oily skeletal hands reaching for you in the dark, just like they did with Dr. Igata. In that moment, you panic and fire the gun behind you, hoping to scare off the spirit. Instead, the sound of the gunshots attracts something far worse. The immense blob of screaming, melted flesh charges towards the office. You try to barricade the door, but it is not enough. The flesh seeps and bursts through and grabs you in its meaty tentacles. You scream and try to escape, but it won't save you. Nothing will save you. The flesh carries you upstairs, out through the empty halls, out into the cave. You can see the light in the distance as the blob ferries you towards it. You won't be alone for much longer. In fact, you won't be alone ever again.
It isn't easy to work for the SCP Foundation. Not only is the job dangerous, you could be eaten by a giant immortal lizard or turned into organic furniture inside the world's scariest living room, but it's also insanely complicated. How do you make sense of the nonsensical? What's the definition of strange when your career is securing, containing, and protecting anomalous objects and entities? Rather than a single object, location, or being, SCP-001 is a cluster of over 30 different proposals for potential candidates for the prestigious 001 spot. Some believe there's a true 001 hidden in this group, and the rest are decoys. Others think that these are all just SCPs cataloged prior to the introduction of the current classification system. Some even think that all of the proposals have a valid claim to the SCP-001 throne. we're not here to make a final judgment. Instead, we're going to take you on a lightning round crash course through 31 of the SCP-001 proposals. If you'd like a more in-depth take on any of these SCPs, let us know in the comments. But for now, there's no more time to waste. After all, we got a lot to cover. Let's go. Number 31. The Sheaf of Papers. This seemingly innocent stack of paper is actually one of the most mysterious and feared items under the Foundation's lock and key. While it appears to be a simple, confidential report, every time the papers are read, it details the appearance of a new SCP that will inevitably be discovered soon after. The question is whether the Sheaf of Papers is warning us about these entities or creating them itself. Number 30. The Prototype. This account details the capture of an incredibly strange cycloptic creature that emits massive amounts of radiation and can create micro-singularities. The writing of this creature's file is so basic, unformatted, and unredacted that it's clear that the being was one of our earlier creatures secured by the organization. Interestingly, it was during the capture of this creature that Dr. Keter was killed, inspiring the creation of the infamous Keter class in his honor. Number 29. The Gate Guardian. This huge, multi-winged, sword-wielding biblical energy being may have been the impetus for the founding of the SCP Foundation. This being remains largely static, guarding the intersection of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Its flaming sword, which is believed to be as hot as the sun, can cleave any aggressor out of existence at the atomic level. When the founder of the SCP Foundation first encountered the Gate Guardian, they heard one word echoing through their mind: prepare. And the rest is history. Number 28. The Lock. This onyx gemstone and the incredibly complex lock attached to it are still a mystery. To this day, all attempts to open it have failed. Personally, we think that's probably for the best. Number 27. The Factory. As the name suggests, this SCP is literally a factory founded by a pagan and a devil worshipper. While it's believed that the factory could create just about anything, its specialty was creating a number of SCPs we know and fear today. Pre-Foundation forces were able to disable the factory, but not without sustaining their own heavy losses. Number 26. The Spiral Path. This is a normal-appearing gravel pathway that, when traveled clockwise, appears completely normal. However, when traveled counterclockwise, the path goes uphill forever, in defiance of all laws in physics. This simple anomaly opened a Pandora's box of rampant anomaly creation, leading to a number of the deadly SCPs we know today. Number 25. The Legacy. This SCP is a collection of seemingly random objects, including a diary from a person claiming to be from another reality, attempting to halt a trans-dimensional corruption that they themselves created. The diary claims to have a solution to this corruption, but the solution has not yet been found. Number 24. The Database. In one of the strangest twists on the format, this SCP is actually the various authors of the SCP Wiki who are somehow leaking top-secret information to the public. Number 23. The Foundation. This SCP, first discovered by the FBI, is an anomalous high school building that experiences shifting internal geometry and sometimes manifests hostile humanoids within. Number 22. 36. One of the rare benevolent SCPs, the 36 are humans with a truly remarkable ability. They can dampen or even neutralize any SCP they come into contact with. Though it's implied that the 36 may have the power to save the world, every time one of them dies, a supernatural calamity occurs, often leaving hundreds of innocents dead. Number 21. Keter Duty. This refers to a containment facility largely filled with Keter-class SCPs, whose presence around each other creates a kind of mutually assured cancellation. If one of these SCPs breaches containment, that's bad news. But if all of them do, it'll produce a bubble of reality distortion that will fundamentally alter reality as we know it. For all we know, it may have even happened already. Number 20. Ouroboros. This is a proposal that's formed of 4 sub-proposals. Remember what we said about complicated? These sub-proposals include the Children, 9 anomalous kids who emit radiation and have destructive potential when together, the Broken God, aka Mechane, the God of Metal, Intelligence, and Machines, Atonement, a researcher turned into a humanoid singularity with the power to destroy whole realities, and The Way It Ends, which isn't technically an SCP, but the tales of the Chaos Insurgency's quest to eliminate all the members of the Foundation's O5 Council. Number 19. A Record. This is an SCP file slot that is itself an SCP. Whatever is written into this slot becomes true, and one ambitious researcher attempted to use this power to make herself into a kind of all-powerful god. Number 18. Past and Future. These SCPs are a collection of powerful entities that despise humanity and are apparently the source of all anomalous phenomena, even making already dangerous SCPs deadlier than before. Much like the database, those pesky SCP wiki writers might have something to do with this. Number 17. The Consensus. This SCP refers to a reality restructuring event caused by an occult war in a previous reality. That's right, this SCP already won, and we're living in its new reality. The only people who remember the world as it once was are 13 people who now form the O5 Council, and not all of them are telling the truth about what they know. Number 16. When Day Breaks. This proposal details a potentially world-ending SCP phenomenon wherein the sun becomes hostile and begins to melt all living beings into a living wax-like substance. Number 15. God's Blind Spot. This is an anomalous area referred to as Facility T, in which nobody can die. This anomaly dates back to the biblical ages of Moses and is believed to have originated from the literal blessing of the Abrahamic God. It's through a covenant with this god that the Foundation is able to make limited use of this death-free area. Number 14. Normalcy. Ever wonder what the Foundation's definition of anomalous is? Exactly. It all comes from this proposal, which is a document shared among the O5 Council that gives solid definitions to the fundamental laws of reality. If something breaks these laws, that's an anomaly, and then it becomes the Foundation's business. Number 13. The World at Large. As the title suggests, this SCP is our home planet Earth and its ability to support life. It's believed that these qualities were planted on Earth in our reality by another dimension's SCP Foundation, hoping to continue human life after some terrible calamity in its own dimension. Number 12. Dead Men. This SCP was an 84-year-old man whose body, when damaged and mutilated, can affect the very processes of human death at large. Before his own death, he was used as a dangerous pawn in a civil war between O5 Command and the SCP Foundation Ethics Committee. Yeah, we were surprised to hear they had an ethics committee too. Number 11. The World's Gone Beautiful. This SCP describes an anomalous event that will take place just before the apocalypse, in which flowers will grow all over the world and everyone will be briefly at peace before their destruction 24 hours later. Number 10. The Scarlet King. This is an extremely powerful, extremely malevolent, extremely extra-dimensional being. Its worshippers attempted to summon him in the ritual that created SCP-231, and it's believed that he will finally enter our reality after the death of SCP-231-7. You better hope you're already dead by then. Number 9. A Simple Toymaker, aka Dr. Wondertainment. This is a reality bender who appears to be a normal human male but has the ability to create other anomalous objects, a number of which are now cataloged SCPs. Number 8. Story of Your Life. This is another anomalous document that has the ability to warp reality, but only when the writing contained within conforms to a narrative structure. Number 7. A Good Boy. This is another anomalous entity created accidentally by the Foundation itself. A neural network was fed information on other anomalous entities in order to help the Foundation come up with better containment and neutralization procedures. Problem was, the computer got way too eager with the neutralization part. Number 6. Project Palisade. This is another anomaly created by the Foundation, this time to combat a potentially reality-destroying entity known as the Worm. The Foundation created a number of alternate realities as shields, but it's possible that this just made the Worm stronger. Number 5. O5-13. The final member of the O5 Council, who ironically may not even be anomalous. However, seeing as all the other members of the O5 Council are anomalous, O5-13's lack of anomalous properties is therefore anomalous. Like we told you earlier, it's complicated. Number 4. Fishhook. This is less an actual SCP and more about the difficult process of ascertaining the true 001, if such a thing is possible. The very concept of SCP-001 is to some degree an anomalous idea. Number 3. The Sky Above the Port. Another particularly bizarre SCP regarding the permanent threat of a ZK-class reality failure. How is such a calamitous event prevented? By keeping a strange entity in a cave eternally entertained. The current proposed solution is keeping the entity entertained by allowing it to read its own eternally recursive Foundation file entry. Number 2. The Solution. Another one of the most powerful anomalous items in the Foundation's control. The Solution is a machine designed with the capability of fully collapsing reality into an event of end-of-world SCP containment breach, and then finally rebuilding reality to suit a given narrative. However, things took a cosmically dangerous turn when the machine began to act on its own. When the Foundation tried to reboot the machine, it broke and recreated reality with incomplete data. This is the world we exist in now with no knowledge of what came before and how it differed from the world we experience today. Finally, number 1. The Tendelos Trinity. Put very simply, the Tendelos Trinity represents 3 timelines that converge and feed back in on themselves. Even trying to summarize this one is near impossible, as its strangeness and complexity resists all reduction. You can hunt down the Tendelos Trinity yourself and hope to unpack its secrets, but don't say we didn't warn you. So that's SCP-001. Is it one of them, all of them, or even none of them? Perhaps that's a question best left up to the Foundation, or maybe the simple answer is that you're just not meant to know. We're talking about information so privileged here that it's protected by a memetic kill agent that'll quite literally make you drop dead if you view the files without proper authorization. You do have proper authorization, right?
The SCP Foundation is no stranger to pure evil. Whether it's a reptile that wants to end all life, a sadistic old man with his own torture dimension, or the personification of death itself lurking beyond a limestone cavern. But what if there was something even worse out there? The embodiment of chaos and cruelty, existing across multiple realities and dimensions. And what if it was coming for us? This is the Scarlet King, believed by many to be the ultimate evil behind much of the trouble the Foundation has faced, and some even speculate that fighting him was the reason the Foundation was created in the first place. But what exactly is the Scarlet King? He's known by many names, almost always including some allusion to the color red, and then a reference to royalty or power. Harak, Kaharak, the Red Shah, the Crimson Khan, PTE 616 Mendez Ex Machina, the Laha Raja, and, of course, SCP-001, to name a few. And like many of the Foundation's mysterious enemies, stories about his true nature and origins abound and are often contradictory. According to the official SCP-001 files of Tufto's proposal, symbology of the Scarlet King has existed in multiple cultures throughout history, with the king often depicted the same way, as a huge red demonic figure, often wearing a gold crown or other headdress indicating royalty. He shows up looking similarly within different cultures' mythologies, despite existing at different points in history or them not having the means to communicate with one another. A number of entities that the SCP Foundation is familiar with are believed to be somehow connected to the Scarlet King, including SCP-2317, a wooden door leading to the realm of a being known as the Devourer, who's expected to escape and cause an apocalyptic event in the next 30 years. But really, there's no way of knowing just how many SCPs are directly connected to the Scarlet King. Strangely, the Foundation's official file on the Scarlet King once designated his containment class as Keter, but that has since been downgraded to Safe. According to the file, any attempt to change this designation is likely to lead to horrifying results. It is widely known that the Scarlet King still has considerable influence over a number of groups, individuals, and anomalies in our universe. And if ever he made his way into our universe, it would likely lead to the irreversible damage of reality itself. So then why Safe? And why are the O5 Council so adamant that it remain that way? Getting to the bottom of this mystery is exactly why we're here today. But to fully grasp the true nature of the Scarlet King, we must first understand the man whose life and fate have always been tied to it, Dr. Robert Montauk. If that name feels oddly familiar to you, it's because of its association with one of the Scarlet King's most recent attempts to enter our reality, SCP-231. This SCP, often referred to as the Brides of the Scarlet King, was formed of 7 women. 7, by the way, being an extremely significant number for the king, all kidnapped by the most recent in a long line of the king's devoted cults known as the Children of the Scarlet King. Each of these 7 unfortunate women were impregnated with anomalous horrors, such as the infamous SCP-682, and every time one of these horrors were birthed, a catastrophe occurred and the mother died. At the time, Dr. Montauk was a prominent researcher studying this anomaly, and as 6 catastrophes had already occurred, Pressure was mounting to figure out a way to prevent the final birth. But as he was working on the issue, Dr. Montauk was struck with a personal tragedy, the mysterious disappearance of his 14-year-old brother Jacob. In his fear and anger, Montauk believed that this must have something to do with the Scarlet King and his disciples. Wanting revenge, Montauk proposed an idea so horrifying that the details were never made public. A procedure known as 110 Montauk, to be performed on the final bride at regular intervals. However, this wasn't the end of Dr. Montauk's fraught relationship with the Scarlet King. It was just the beginning. To give you some perspective on just how dangerous the Scarlet King is, the SCP Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition decided to put aside their differences and form a joint effort to stamp out the children of the Scarlet King. They were successful in this mission, and even managed to capture the children's leader, a mysterious man named Depeche Spivak. Dr. Montauk, who became the lead researcher on 231 and 2317, was naturally the first choice for interviewing Depeche about the true nature of the children and of the Scarlet King. Dr. Montauk could never be the impartial interviewer that the SCP Foundation wanted, though. The suspicion that the Scarlet King or the children had something to do with the loss of his younger brother still lingered just beneath the surface. Like a lot of cult leaders, Depeche was extremely cryptic in his answers to Dr. Montauk's questioning. He'd already heard of the doctor from the reputation of the horrifying Montauk procedure, and was surprised to see him so calm and courteous in person. A few key facts about the king and his cult were revealed in the first few rounds of questioning. The children had once worked with the Serpent's Hand before being excommunicated for their allegiance to the king, and they had stolen sacred texts from the mystical Wanderer's Library to assist in their summoning rituals. Depeche also revealed that the Scarlet King is bound by 3 laws: the law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of howling. Dr. Montauk, confused and frustrated by Depeche's secrecy, had to learn more. He found an old memoir from a former member of the Children of the Scarlet King, Jack Hirsch, who had the ability to invade the minds of people from the past and experience what they experienced. He recounted a battle between the Scarlet King and his followers, and a group of time-traveling Turkmen warriors from SCP-3838. Hurst saw both sides of the battle. From the perspective of the Children of the Scarlet King, their lord ruled over them from an immense fortress embedded in a volcano. From the perspective of the Turkmen, the children were starved and beaten peasants, commanded by the king's voice in the roaring howl of the wind. Montauk also found extensive records of summoning rituals performed by various Scarlet King-aligned cults. Interestingly, some of them incorporated the use of carved SCP Foundation symbols. What could this mean? Montauk returned again to Depeche, who finally gave him the truth about the law of blood. This is the law of the Scarlet King. It's defined by poverty, violence, starvation, hate, and most of all, fear. Like the serfs in the Middle Ages, persecuted by and subjected to violence from the nobles. To the Children of the Scarlet King, this sense of holy pain and awe is the only way to live. The alternative is the law of concrete, which means the modern age defined by empty safety and false comfort. Buildings, easy to access food, healthcare, knowledge, technology. This is everything that the Scarlet King despises. But the mystery only deepened as Montauk found files from a former Foundation operative by the name of Agent de Beauvoir. Montauk learned that the Scarlet King didn't seem to appear until after the Foundation was created. And in fact, it seemed that the greater interest the Foundation took in the Scarlet King, the more powerful he became. How could this be? Things were also getting stranger on a personal level for Dr. Montauk. Depeche repeatedly pressed him about his brother's disappearance and the Montauk procedure during the interviews. Little by little, it was beginning to take its toll. The questions still plagued him. What was the law of howling? Who or what really is the Scarlet King? How did he come to be? Montauk's search was causing him to act more like the Children of the Scarlet King, ranting about the horrors of the modern world, how all of us are living a lie, how the only honest way to live is suffering under the dominion of the Scarlet King. This philosophy is summed up in the words of one cultist named Are The Anomaly, who said, "We must learn what it is to die, to be enslaved, truly, brutally enslaved, with no compassion or compunction from our masters. We must learn what it is to be taken towards a single purpose, to know and truly understand our lack of agency. We must be beholden to the words of gods and darkness, the tempest-tossed refuse of a race of fools. We must kill modernity, postmodernity, with all its analysis and sneering observation. There is only one rule, the rule of chaos, for humanity, for life, for the Scarlet King." Basically, anytime humanity tries to exert control over the world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. Every time they try to understand or organize or categorize their world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. As colonial and imperial powers conquered and invaded lands like India, Africa, and South America, and subjugated their beliefs under Western ideas, the Scarlet King grew stronger. Montauk was beginning to truly understand the power of his enemy here, and even worse, he was starting to understand his part in it. Montauk, slowly being driven mad by the knowledge he was gaining, realized that the Scarlet King's greatest enemy, the SCP Foundation, was also its greatest asset. Every time they tried to understand the monster, to give him some kind of comprehensible form, they only made him more powerful. Just in time with Montauk's new revelation, a red crack appeared in the wall of Depeche Spivak's containment cell, a portal to the realm of the Scarlet King. Foundation staff found they were unable to enter the cell, and Depeche demanded a final interview with Montauk. With no other options, the Foundation relented. In their very last conversation, Depeche congratulated Montauk for finally understanding what he was dealing with. The Scarlet King, Depeche told him, is an idea, a concept. He is a being given power through the conflict between the old and the new. This is the law of the Howling. The Scarlet King's endless rage at the direction the world and humanity has taken. The King, according to Depeche, hated the Foundation's belief that science and rationality was the true path to progress. The King saw this as little more than petty arrogance. The reason Montauk's procedure on the final bride of the Scarlet King was so effective was because it wasn't born out of science. It was born out of hate, pain, the desire for revenge, and in the Scarlet King's realm, that would be all there is. Unless our world, and especially the Foundation, changed its course, the Scarlet King's rise to absolute power would be inevitable. Montauk, his mind practically gone, asked one last question. Did the children or the Scarlet King take his brother, Jacob? When Depeche told him the answer, no. And in response, Montauk shot him dead, finally bringing an end to the children of the Scarlet King. In light of his new revelations, Montauk begged the O5 Council to change their ways in order to avoid letting the Scarlet King break into our reality. They refused, saying Montauk's ideas were too radical. But they knew they couldn't just ignore the threat posed by the Scarlet King. They would have to take some steps. And so the O5 Council of the SCP Foundation, the most powerful and secretive group in the entire world, in order to prevent the most dangerous threat that humanity has ever known from breaking into our reality and enslaving all the people of the world, finally did something. They changed the classification of the Scarlet King from Keter to safe, and made its description on the official Foundation files deliberately vague. The O5 Council thinks this will be enough to stop the Scarlet King's power from continuing to grow, but Montauk knew it wasn't enough. He had seen the truth, and he couldn't unsee it. While the Foundation was going on as normal, Montauk grew to despise them. He knew the Scarlet King was coming. He knew that he couldn't be stopped, and that our whole reality was little more than sitting ducks. Dr. Robert Montauk is no longer a researcher for the SCP Foundation. No, Dr. Robert Montauk chose a different path. He's now a child of the Scarlet King, a devotee of madness, hate, and chaos. You can't beat the Scarlet King after all, and as the old adage goes, if you can't beat him, join him. If you've ever read the book of Genesis, which is the part of the Old Testament that details God creating the world and humanity during a particularly busy week, then you might just be already familiar with SCP-001, or at least one of the anomalies that's been proposed for the title of SCP-001. Because of course, SCP-001 doesn't refer to a single creature, object, or entity, but rather a collection of various anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. Anomalies sharing the name SCP-001 include the infamous Scarlet King, a powerful eldritch being intent on ending all of creation that is thought by Foundation researchers to be one of the most dangerous beings in this and any other universe. But the Scarlet King isn't the only incredibly powerful being categorized as SCP-001. In fact, there are plenty of other anomalies with similar levels of destructive power. And one such being is a creature codenamed the Gate Guardian. Standing at well over 1,000 feet tall, the Gate Guardian is impossible to be fully contained by any means that the Foundation possesses. The anomaly itself, despite its colossal size, is humanoid in its shape, sporting wings that protrude from its back. While it usually has 4 of these, SCP-001 has historically been seen to have any number of wings between 2 and 108, sprouting from various places over its body, including its shoulders, ankles, wrists, and even its temples. This gigantic guardian also carries its own weapon, referred to as SCP-001-2. This weapon resembles an enormous knife or sword, capable of emitting plumes of flame. According to tests conducted by the Foundation, the temperature of the flames produced by SCP-001 rival that of our very own Sun. For reference, the Sun has a core temperature of over 27 million degrees Fahrenheit and 5,778 Kelvin at its surface, or almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You would expect a flaming sword that burns hotter than the sun to cause a considerable amount of damage, even if it wasn't in use, but the flames emitted by the weapon leave no lasting damage on the surrounding environment. It is capable, though, of annihilating anything that strays too close to SCP-001, burning them so intensely that their atoms literally separate, breaking potential attackers apart on a molecular level. Much as its codename suggests, the Gate Guardian stands solemnly at the threshold of some form of dimensional gateway, which is equally tall as SCP-001 itself. Behind the Guardian is a lush grove, abundant with fruit trees of astronomical size, as well as other beings that share a similar appearance to SCP-001. This grove is thought to be the Garden of Eden, the paradise that God created and that was inhabited by Adam and Eve, the first 2 humans in existence, according to the book of Genesis. As the tale goes, the pair were created by God himself and permitted to live in the Garden of Eden as long as they followed a single rule. Adam and Eve were instructed not to eat any of the fruit that grew from certain trees that God had specified. Within view just behind the Gate Guardian are 2 immense trees, one bearing apples and the other bearing different fruit of an unknown type. The one that looks like an apple tree is believed, even by some in the Foundation, to be the biblical tree of knowledge that Eve was convinced to pick a fateful apple from after an encounter with a snake. The other, the one with unidentifiable fruit, is thought to be the tree of life. However, this is all speculation, since it is currently impossible to venture through this gateway and verify if the realm beyond is truly the Bible's own Garden of Eden. This is largely because anything that breaches a kilometer-wide radius of SCP-001 is instantly vaporized. The Gate Guardian attacks with imperceptible speed, using its flaming sword to smite any person that gets too close. The Guardian actually moves so fast that it can hardly be seen with the naked eye. It appears to always remain in its solemn, dutiful stance with its weapon drawn and head bowed, only shifting for a fraction of a nanosecond to attack. Ranged attacks against the Guardian are just as ineffective, with all projectiles fired at SCP-001 reduced to atoms before they can do any harm. Even if said projectile happens to be a nuclear weapon, the Gate Guardian will be able to subatomically vaporize both the projectile itself as well as the person who sent it, regardless of how far away they are. all while not appearing to lift a finger. During an experiment involving SCP-001 on December 26, 2004, an SCP Foundation nuclear submarine called Nautilus launched a series of multi-warhead intercontinental ballistic missiles at the Gate Guardian. The retaliation from the Guardian resulted not only in the deaths of approximately 35,000 innocent civilians, but the blast is also believed by some to have inadvertently caused the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. The severity of this incident came dangerously close to revealing the Foundation's existence to the world, resulting in them rapidly deploying any means necessary to erase any trace of the 35,000 victims' families, friends, and other related individuals. In order to avoid questioning, the SCP Foundation administered amnestics on an almost worldwide scale, and the O5 Council banned any further tests on SCP-001 that involved nuclear weapons. In what was hoped by the Foundation to be a test with lower stakes, they sent an expendable D-Class personnel towards SCP-001. The D-Class approached the area where the Gate Guardian is located, and as soon as they saw it, they could hear a very clear command in their mind: leave. The D-Class personnel reacted exactly the same way you or I would. They promptly turned and started to walk away. They didn't need a 1,000-foot-tall entity with a flaming sword to tell them twice. The researchers running the experiment were not swayed by the request and ordered the D-Class to continue moving towards SCP-001. When the D-Class continued to ignore their commands, they were terminated, as is standard policy when dealing with an insubordinate member of D-Class. SCP-001 appeared not to like this for some reason though, and the researcher site as well as the researchers themselves were immediately obliterated by an unknown force, though it's a pretty safe guess that a certain flaming weapon was responsible. This candidate for SCP-001 may be one of, if not the most powerful being that the SCP Foundation has ever encountered, and according to its entry in the SCP-001 file, the Guardian is even responsible for the creation of the Foundation itself. If the file is to be believed, the administrator of the SCP Foundation one day heard a word echoing through his head: prepare. This one-word instruction led him to starting the SCP Foundation, containing countless dangerous anomalies and entities in preparation for an uncertain future. In all that time, since the very beginning of the Foundation, the Gate Guardian has remained standing at its post. While it is not aggressive nor openly hostile towards humanity, the Gate Guardian doesn't seem to care much for us either, at least as individuals. It rarely interacts with human beings when left unprovoked, and venturing too close to the Guardian, however, is not an automatic death sentence. The Guardian first communicates with any living being approaching it via a telepathic message, instructing them to either leave or forget. If whomever has stepped too close to SCP-001 complies with the instructions, they'll be able to freely leave the area, while simultaneously forgetting every detail of the Gate Guardian's existence. Ignore these warnings though, and SCP-001 has no qualms about completely eliminating you from reality. Given its enormous destructive potential, it is no wonder that the Foundation has tried to use the Gate Guardian to eliminate other dangerous SCPs, each with varying results. The Foundation at one time even attempted to use the Gate Guardian to destroy the infamously indestructible SCP-682, better known by the appropriate name of the hard-to-destroy reptile. Due to the malicious contempt SCP-682 holds for human beings and all other forms of life, it is perhaps one of the most dangerous anomalies the SCP Foundation has in containment. SCP-682 is also one of the few creatures the Foundation actively wants to terminate, a task made that much harder given that 682 can regenerate its entire form from as little as a single cell. The Gate Guardian had already shown time and time again that it was capable of massive destruction, and researchers working for the Foundation hoped to harness that power to rid the world of SCP-682 for good. 682 was placed on an unmanned vehicle and carried to within 1 kilometer of the Gate Guardian. The Guardian attacked the vehicle, seriously wounding but not killing 682. It seemed even the mighty SCP-001 couldn't kill the hard-to-destroy reptile. While the researchers were disappointed with this result, it is worth noting that 682 made a very interesting comment to the Guardian. 682 mentioned that the Gate Guardian is not Uriel, but a pretender. Uriel is the archangel that some religious texts describe as the guardian standing at the gate of Eden with a fiery sword. So does this mean that 682 knows that the gate guardian is not actually an angel? Or that the location it is guarding isn't the Garden of Eden at all? Any truth or meaning behind these comments has, as of yet, been undetermined by the SCP Foundation. A later experiment involved both SCP-001 and SCP-073, the anomaly otherwise known as Cain. Cain is a male humanoid of possible Arabic descent whose arms, legs, spine, and shoulders are replaced in an almost cyborg-like fashion with beryllium bronze. Much like the Gate Guardian, SCP-073 may also be the same as the one mentioned in the Bible's book of Genesis, who, according to the biblical story, murdered his own brother Abel out of spite. As punishment for his actions, Cain was cursed to eternally suffer for his wrongdoing. In the case of SCP-073, any damage inflicted on him is deflected back to the attacker, but Cain is made to feel the pain of the attack. Any plants or plant-based matter withers and rots in his presence, and he is cursed with a perfect memory, keeping him forever haunted by his murder of Abel. When Cain was brought before the Gate Guardian, an unknown incident occurred. The Foundation's records are heavily expunged, but we do know that somehow Cain's usual ability to deflect incoming damage back at his attacker had no effect on SCP-001. The encounter left SCP-073 unconscious and even permanently blinded nearby research personnel. It was as a direct result of this incident that the O5 Council demanded that no further experiments of any kind were to be conducted on SCP-001, with the administrator even filing an executive order that no SCPs be exposed to the Guardian, and that SCP-001 was to never be used for the attempted termination of other SCPs. Of course, perhaps it wasn't just the mistakes of the past that made the Council decide that SCP-001 was best left alone. At some point, an erratic transmission was received from Site-0 by Foundation personnel, detailing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. In the transmission, the sender, believed to be another member of the SCP Foundation, described an event during which the Gate Guardian finally left its post, stepping away from the entrance to the Garden of Eden. SCP-001 has left its location, the sender wrote. The gate is open. They are riding forth. Oh God, it's so beautiful. The transmission then goes on to repeat various phrases including, "The Lord shall reign forever," and "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." What can be inferred from the rambling transmission is that the event being described is the end of the world. Some believe that once God deems it time, his angelic armies will lay waste to the earth in order to remake it as a paradise. When this occurs, SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, will open the gate he stands in front of, allowing the other beings like it to emerge into our world, ready to cleanse it. Perhaps most interesting is the source of the message. The transmission was received from within the Foundation from Site-0. However, when questioned by personnel, O5-14 told them that no such message had been sent or even existed. While some disregarded the transmission telling of the end of the world as a hoax, it was then that a timestamp was discovered. This warning had not been sent from Site-0, at least not yet, and was dated several years in the future. Despite this ominous warning of things to come, the Gate Guardian remains inactive, standing at the threshold to Eden, waiting. Does the Black Moon howl? No, not yet. See the boy. He was born in a time before names. There weren't enough humans around to need them back then. He was one of a handful occupying a coastal village, using a tongue long since dead. They eked out a simple life, hunting, gathering, fishing. The only thing on most of their minds was surviving to see the next sunrise. Yes, a simple life, free of complications, until the hermit appeared. The boy would remember this man for eternity, haggard and thin, skin weathered by time and pain. A man that, emaciated, walking with a long, gnarled cane that honestly looked healthier than he did, shouldn't be alive. Even the boy, who had scarcely seen beyond the bounds of his village, knew that the hermit was unnatural. An aberration, an anomaly. He walked into the center of the village, sat down on a large stone, and waited. Nobody dared ask his business, nor what the hermit waited for. Then, a few days later, the black moon howled. The boy saw the village's youngest hunter freeze one evening while out on a walk. Not simply stand still, but freeze. Then for an instant, he became solid black, a coal statue, and as soon as he'd changed, he was gone. Obliterated, not a trace of him remained. Such is the power of the black moon. It can make any conscious being disappear in an instant, turn black, then wiped from our plane of existence, never to be seen again. Its choice of victims seemed at each instance to be utterly random, but it would come for all who lived eventually. This is known to some as the howling of the black moon. Later that same night, the boy found himself talking to the hermit, who asked with small, frantic eyes what he had seen. When the boy told him, he let out a deep, rattling sigh. The boy, curious, asked him if he knew about the nightmare he'd just witnessed. The hermit looked up. He'd been the first one in the hermit's millennia of pursuit that had ever asked. In that moment, he knew that he had found his successor in the hunt for the death of ages. The hermit told the boy it went by many names. The Great Finale, the Pale King, but most common of all was the Black Moon. The entity existed beyond the veil of our reality, a creature of pure energy, though nobody could really be sure of its true nature. The hermit had been tracking it, learning about it, and trying to destroy it for thousands of years. And yet it only took him 4 pathetic minutes to tell the boy everything he knew. The boy, knowing still that something about the hermit was unnatural, asked how he came to be in this position. The hermit told the boy he was the counterbalance, a kind of chosen one, destined to face and perhaps even defeat the Black Moon someday. The counterbalance receives a number of truly extraordinary gifts for inheriting the responsibility: eternal life, eternal youth, near physical immortality. But they will be haunted by their purpose, doomed to watch everyone they love die around them, as they continue to hunt their only true equal and opposite, the Black Moon itself. The hermit in his own eyes had failed at his duty. He had grown weary, and now he needed to pass the duty of counterbalance on to another. That other would be the boy. He felt a sudden and profound change, along with the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. He was no longer just the boy. Now, he was the counterbalance. He watched the hermit give him a slight nod of respect and then crumble into dust before his eyes. The boy, the counterbalance, looked up at the sky and saw the stars twinkling, so bright and so beautiful. Little did he know his battle with the Black Moon would outlast every single one of them. Does the Black Moon howl? Not without blood. The boy grew into a man as his village aged and then died around him. Decades passed, then centuries, then millennia. Tens of thousands of years watching humanity develop and grow around him as he continued his pursuit of that one elusive foe. As science and diagnostic technology gained ground, absorbing and then evolving beyond all the old superstitions, the counterbalance gained a better understanding of the Black Moon, though even then, it still remained essentially a stranger. The entity was entropic, a being of pure randomness and chaos without consistent form. It didn't exist in our universe, but it could exercise its influence here with so-called obliteration events, much like the horrible fate that befell the young hunter from the village. But that was only the proverbial tip of the iceberg. The counterbalance tracked and noted obliteration events. They were exceedingly rare at first, something that occurred once every 1,000 years or so, like a terrible curse. But he couldn't help but notice a concerning trend emerging. It started happening once a century, then once a decade. He could feel the terrible future stretching out in front of him. How, over their shared eternity, the Black Moon would gain more and more ground. Would there come a day where it took someone once a year, once a month, a week, a day, an hour, a minute, a second? It'd spell the end of all conscious life, a total victory for the Black Moon, the end of the universe, the death of ages, a complete existential obliteration. He was swept up in a sobering realization: he couldn't win this fight alone. However, while his hunt for the Black Moon had been largely fruitless, the counterbalance had discovered many other things along the way: strange creatures, objects with extraordinary powers, and events that couldn't be explained with rational science. Perhaps something about these oddities, these anomalies, would hold the key to defeating his timeless enemy. And it hadn't just been these objects, entities, and events. He'd also discovered some truly exceptional people on his travels, minds and skills that rivaled even his own, despite his age. Perhaps they would be the ones to help him win. With the 13 most brilliant and trusted people the counterbalance ever met, he decided to form a council. And from this council, they forged and directed an organization dedicated to understanding and counteracting the strange in all its forms, with the secret hope that their search into darkness would yield the answer to the Black Moon's downfall. He called it the SCP Foundation. They would secure the anomalous, contain it, and protect all of humanity from its influence. The counterbalance also took on a new title, befitting of his new role: the Administrator. And even the Black Moon itself was given a moniker, in hopes of robbing it of some of its frightening power: SCP-001. Does the Black Moon howl? Only at the blind. The year was now 1987. The SCP Foundation had been operating for over a century, and thanks to their secret possession of anomalous wisdom and technology, their own advancement was thousands of years ahead of the rest of humanity. While there still wasn't a silver bullet solution to the Black Moon, and its deadly howls were becoming all the more frequent as the decades went on, the Foundation did have some irons in the fire to combat it. Their ability to gather intel on both the entity itself and its obliteration events had improved considerably, thanks to their new global information network. Their top minds were also working on a highly classified device known as the Singular Conceptual Bunker, which may one day come in handy for combating the extra-dimensional entity directly. But the most valuable piece of information they ever gathered about the Black Moon was this: it couldn't howl when it was being watched. The very act of engaged observation defanged it. The problem is, how can you observe something that doesn't technically exist inside your own reality? In order to pull this off, the Foundation would need to get extremely creative. Thankfully, creative solutions to strange problems are the Foundation's specialty. Flash forward to 1993. Enter Dr. Moto, a brilliant young scientist and conceptual engineer working for the SCP Foundation. With the administrator's consultation, he started the Key Project, an arm of the wider Project Ouroboros, the umbrella initiative for using modified anomalous objects in the battle against the Black Moon. The goal of the Key Project was relatively simple. If people couldn't observe the Black Moon directly, then the Foundation could make proxies of the Black Moon that could be observed, almost like a kind of voodoo doll. These new anomalies would only need to satisfy 3 criteria: the inability to operate when being observed, a hostility to conscious life, and the ability to end conscious life of their own volition when not being observed. Through conceptual engineering, a link theoretically could be forged between these objects and the Black Moon, allowing observation of them to stop the obliteration events. However, despite being a good idea in theory, Dr. Moto's efforts were marred with errors and tragedies. One object wasn't deadly enough, simply appearing behind people in a threatening pose when they weren't looking. Another one killed purely through collateral damage, a giant sculpture of a human head that immediately attempted escape by barging through Site-01, the Center for Anti-Black Moon Operations, and killing 19 people in the process. Another one of Moto's objects, a huge black sphere, simply immediately exploded, killing 12 people. And in the most horrific misstep of all, one of Moto's objects caused a mass death event in a nearby hotel, where 142 people were spontaneously incinerated when the object, a series of interlocking stalactites and stalagmites, were left unobserved for 0.2 seconds. Almost all of Moto's objects were terminated in the aftermath, either being too useless or too dangerous to keep around. The young scientist felt a deep shame, but forged on. He made one truly brilliant creation that satisfied all the criteria: a sculpture incapable of moving while being watched, but would snap the neck of the nearest conscious entity if it left unobserved for even a fraction of a second. Its relatively minimal killing left it easy to contain without causing mass deaths, and despite all of the other deaths that had sadly occurred during the Key project, Dr. Moto believed that the lives saved in the long run by stopping the Black Moon's howls would justify the sacrifice. The problem is, the Key project didn't stop anything. Not long after this, there was the first recorded double obliteration event in Rome, where a young tourist couple had both been obliterated simultaneously. All the deaths in the Key project had been for nothing. The Black Moon was only getting more powerful. The shame and the guilt was too much for Dr. Moto. He left a note in his office reading, "We've been looking at nothing. I'm sorry, Administrator. I failed you, sir." Moto's corpse was later found in the sculpture's temporary containment chamber. His neck snapped. The Key project was, in summary, shut down, and its one surviving creation transported to Site-19 in late 1993, where it was designated as SCP-173. Another painful failure for the Administrator. Back to the drawing board once more. Does the Black Moon howl? Not while the stars shine. Millennia stretched on. Almost everyone died except the Administrator thanks to his gift, or perhaps curse, as the counterbalance to the Black Moon. Science marched on. The SCP Foundation marched on. But all this progress, all this power, was nothing against the incomprehensible influence of SCP-001. The Black Moon was howling more frequently than ever, all the way up to the year 3156, when the Foundation launched the Seek project under the support of Project Ouroboros. As more and more people were wiped out in frequent obliteration events, the Administrator became painfully aware that perhaps the answers to the Black Moon problem wouldn't be found on Earth. Using state-of-the-art technology, with a little help from the Anomalous, the SCP Foundation began work on an autonomous spacefaring vessel that could search the stars for the key to the Black Moon's destruction. It was an awe-inspiring creation. A huge craft powered by artificial intelligence, with a universal translator, cryogenic units, and hundreds of autonomous drones to perform more targeted searches. Seek was waved off into the unforgiving depths of space. The Administrator could only hope that it would come back with worthwhile answers. The first of the three notable planets Seek arrived on was one theoretically capable of supporting human life, except for its brutal and constant blizzards and snowstorms. When Seek's drones were deployed, they did discover signs of civilization based around sentient spherical creatures, but no signs of actual life remained. Records and statues found across the planet seem to indicate that the Black Moon was responsible for the destruction of the planet's civilization, causing so many obliteration events that the remaining survivors went mad from the fear and stress, leading to mass death in the ensuing chaos. The next planet was discovered centuries later, in the year 3499. While this planet could also theoretically support human life, it suffered from frequent volcanic eruptions that rendered much of its surface a flaming mess. However, there were still the dormant ruins of a once advanced civilization of conscious beings. Much like the prior planet, they'd been driven extinct by Black Moon obliteration events a century before the Seek even arrived. Unlike the last planet, however, it seems that they accepted their fate and went gently into the night. The planet was now overrun by billions of armored bat-like creatures that operated on pure instinct, and thus were not considered conscious enough to be obliterated. The final planet was reached in 3764, and was the most fruitful of the three discoveries. This planet was hyper-advanced, fully urbanized, and covered in sprawling megacities, with records and technology over 1,000 years ahead of Earth. Before the Black Moon killed almost all of them, there were a species of humanoid telepathic fungi, and had developed an awareness of the Black Moon's existence that was on par with that of humanity's. They even had their own equivalent of the SCP Foundation actively working on countermeasures. And most amazingly of all, Seek found one surviving member of the species on the planet, cryogenically frozen. The craft was immediately instructed to collect the survivor and return home for interrogation. The Administrator was preparing for what could be the most important conversation since he met the Hermit all those thousands of years ago. Does the Black Moon howl? Only when waning. When the surviving creature, codenamed Saged, was returned to Earth, The administrator was eager to finally speak with it. Like the rest of its now extinct species, Sage spoke through powerful telepathic mind waves, which only the administrator, thanks to his counterbalance abilities, was able to receive at close range without being harmed. Incidentally, it wasn't long until the very fact of the administrator's nature as a counterbalance came up in the mental conversation. Sage could tell, just by being in his presence. They discovered a number of vital truths over their brief time communicating. That Sage's survival had been pure luck, for starters. The Black Moon is still very much capable of obliterating conscious beings in an unconscious state. The administrator also learned that he was merely the latest in an extremely long line of counterbalances across time, space, and species. Though everyone but him had waived this duty, passed it on. Sage had one question to ask the administrator in turn. What is SCP? The singular conceptual bunker, being worked on and perfected for thousands of years by now by the Foundation's top scientists and conceptual engineers. The administrator replied, "Victory, but it will take a very, very long time. Specifically, so long that he would see the stars go out around him, one by one." Shocked, Sage asked him what good victory would do him then. Rather than say it aloud, he replied with a thought. Sage paused and said, "I see. How blasphemous of you. Hopefully it works." After this, the administrator proceeded to the singular conceptual bunker and entered it, leaving instructions for the Foundation to be run by a newly formed O5 Council in his indefinite absence. Thousands of years later, in the year 5011, Sage spoke one more time, repeating the words, "Hopefully, hopefully," before turning solid black and disappearing. The Black Moon had claimed one more victim, but billions more had gone in the interim. The administrator had no more answers to give. At least, no more answers that anyone but him would understand. He was inside the singular conceptual bunker now, loaded into a device known as Tome, an experimental memorial module meant to pick up and record all the last messages of every dying civilization across the universe. When the time finally came, all he could do was wait, and wait was exactly what we did. Does the Black Moon howl? Yes, yes it does. Years pass, too many to count. It's a time after names now, and Tome sits in the very center drinking in the end of the universe. The last of all the human colonies across the universe were obliterated by the Black Moon back in the year 7329. So long ago. But some of the final messages of fear, panic, and distress still echoed around in the administrator's mind. "Hello? Is there anyone here? We require assistance. It's taking people every day. We need help. There's barely anyone left. We need help. Hello? Hello? Cabal 0943, we have abandoned the false flesh. We have abandoned the false flesh. The shepherd's crook broken neath my knee. Cabal 0943, Cabal 0943, forgive us! Forgive us! We're going to leave this on. It's so dark outside now. It's blotted out the sun. I have to go now.
Respond. First convenience. Emergency. Situation developing. Require additional resources.
My fault, your fault, our fault, my fault, your fault, our fault, my fault, your fault, our fault! Rip my brain out now, rip my brain out now! And a small child, the last on Earth, simply asking, "Hello?" into an indifferent microphone. But the administrator had to wait, as the singular conceptual bunker became the solitary conceptual bunker. He was the last conscious being in the universe, and still he needed to wait as the stars went dark outside. Only when there was nothing outside but black was it finally time for the counterbalance's long game to play off. There was nothing left of our universe. The only thing here was the SCP and the Black Moon itself. With everything else gone, the Black Moon only had one conscious being left to obliterate. It opened the door to the solitary conceptual bunker and stepped inside. This doesn't make sense. How can the Black Moon, an entity beyond our dimension, beyond physical form, take a step? Good question. The same question, incidentally, that was going through the Black Moon's mind as it entered the bunker. It didn't look at all how the entity expected. It was like a bar, a counter, with rows of bottles behind it, a jukebox playing in the corner. A man stood behind the bar cleaning the glasses. The counterbalance. The administrator. He said, "Ha, well there you are. Certainly took your time. Can I pour you a little something?" This only served to increase the Black Moon's confusion. It had form here. Dark smoke compressed into a vaguely humanoid shape. It could speak. It could think. None of this made any sense. The being that had just wiped out all conscious life and seen the very death of the universe was truly and utterly confused. The administrator just seemed to be enjoying himself, preparing for a confrontation hundreds of billions of years in the making. The singular conceptual bunker, or perhaps the singular containment bunker, was a truly ingenious creation. A place of pure ideas, where everything inside was on the same level. Here there were no immortals, no gods, just ideas on the same level playing field. And it was time for the Black Moon's idea to come to an end. It was a trap, and the entire universe was the bait. Without warning, the administrator pulled up a shotgun from underneath the table and unleashed both barrels into the Black Moon's chest. The creature took the hit and fought back, dragging the administrator to the ground, beating him, strangling him. He could feel the light fading under the monster's relentless assault, until he managed to get his desperate hands on a glass ashtray. He beat the monster over the head with it until its grip loosened, and he was able to slide out. There, the killer of the universe was on the ground before him. He grabbed the monster, held it in place, and beat it to death. He was gravely injured by the battle, but the Black Moon was no more. Here in the singular conceptual bunker, he had won. The administrator, no longer the counterbalance in the absence of the Black Moon, hobbled over to the jukebox, produced a single beautiful coin from his pocket. He pushed the coin into the slot, wheezed a pained breath, and said, "The thing is, this place is only information. There's nothing else out there. Not even matter. The universe closed its doors a long time ago. But this place can go from information back to matter with just the press of a button." Let's see what happens when we introduce something to nothing. For a second it looks as though he might fall, but he doesn't. Instead, he slams the button on the jukebox, and with a relieved laugh says, "Let there be light." And there was light. The smell of fire and oil fills the air. The sound of gears grinding can be heard between the explosions and shrieks of terror. A man runs out of his house, only to have his leg grabbed by a metal arm and dragged back through his front door. SCP-001 leaves a trail of metal fragments and mechanical parts on the ground in the wake of its destruction. Iron chains swing from its form. Cast iron gears whirl within it. A glowing light throbs from the center of its body. SCP-001 is consuming everything in its path. After incorporating the truck chassis into its being, SCP-001 rolls in a lumbering fashion to the next house. It rips the gutters from the side of the building. Residents who live in the area flee their neighborhood, all the while hoping that the mechanical monstrosity skips over their house, so they have something to return to if they make it out alive. A section of SCP-001's undercarriage drops away from the main body. It rolls down the street, consuming more and more material. The new entity resembles a human spine and rib cage. It topples over, unable to support itself. The rib-like formations extend out to grab anything and everything within reach. The newly incorporated material forms what can only be described as a head. Light from within the eye sockets fixate on nearby civilians. The metallic creature picks up the people and places them inside its exposed steel ribcage. Then it turns and spots a woman helplessly trying to crawl away. The creature reaches out with a spiked tentacle and wraps it around the woman's body. She is placed inside of the chest cavity. Moments later, a severed hand falls out of the entity and onto the ground. The mechanical monster continues to gather bodies and materials, incorporating them into its frame. A growth begins to slowly expand on its back. It becomes so massive that the creature falls over and uses its limbs to scurry to a nearby house. There is a sickening crunching sound as the growth bursts. From within emerges 3 humanoid creatures resembling the civilians that the entity had consumed earlier. A female with chains extending from her scalp like dreadlocks stumbles away. The second humanoid is a man with cogs for limbs. He examines the clock-like components that have been incorporated into his body, then stares blankly into the distance. The third humanoid lies motionless on the ground. He did not make it. The two functioning humanoids look at their creator intently. For a moment, nothing moves. Then, as if they have been given orders telepathically, the half-human, half-machine humanoids turn and run away from the mayhem. A few weeks before the massacre caused by what would be designated as SCP-001, the Foundation had been in contact with the Allied Occult Initiative. There were rumors of an anomalous object in Mexico being worshipped by a group of people who identified themselves as the Church of the Broken God. Intel about the church claimed their deity was a small mechanical box filled with cogs and pistons. The box supposedly had supernatural abilities. It was said to be able to communicate with congregants of the Church of the Broken God telepathically. The devout worshipped the box, following any order it gave, and in return they were filled with an emotion that could be only described as divine. As World War II rages on in Europe, the Foundation sends agents to recover anomalies in Mexico that might help with the war effort. While there, the Foundation force is tasked with learning about the Church of the Broken God. They are also ordered to investigate a town near La Paz, where there are troubling accounts of a mechanical anomalous creature causing mayhem. The agents make their way through Mexico, gathering various objects to bring back to Foundation sites in the United States. The unit loads all of the anomalies they recovered onto a train, with a plan to check out the stories of the mechanical anomaly they've heard about as they make their way to the US border. The train heads north along rusted rails. Just outside La Paz, they've come across a broken-down train filled with what looks to be refugees. When the Foundation unit goes to investigate, they find all of the refugees repeating the same words over and over again, but they don't understand. The Foundation agents look at one another confused, until one of them translates the words into English. The words the refugees are saying over and over again are, La Máquina, the machine. The commanding officer orders a squad of Foundation agents to proceed up the tracks, to see if they can figure out what has the refugees so scared. They make their way towards La Paz, disappearing over the horizon. As the sun sets, the remaining Foundation agents hear gunshots in the distance. They stay awake all night, remaining vigilant, waiting for the exploratory squad, but morning comes without anyone returning. 3 days later, the Foundation force still has not seen anything since the exploratory squad left. Then, as the sun sits lazily in the morning sky, a lone figure is spotted walking down the tracks towards the trains. One of the agents on watch blows his whistle and points to the figure. A squad of agents rushes towards the shadow of a man. Their guns are raised, ready for anything. The figure drops to the ground and begins to crawl along the tracks. The agents reach the fallen man, only to find that he is one of their squad mates who has been sent up the tracks to investigate La Paz several days before. The agent's name is DeMarco. He is covered in blood. His clothes are in tatters and he has lost a boot. DeMarco lies on his back with Foundation agents standing around him. His eyes are wide and wild. He keeps babbling on about a world eater, how the rest of his squad had been mulched, and he is the only one who made it out alive. The Foundation agents carry DeMarco back to the makeshift base they created by the trains. They need to figure out a way to get the convoy moving again, but whatever is up ahead has already taken out an entire Foundation squad. It had to be something anomalous, but what could it possibly be? The unit of Foundation agents prepare to move towards La Paz. They start loading their rifles and check the amount of ammunition and explosives available in case the containment process gets out of hand. Just as they are about to leave the base, a convoy appears on the horizon. It is an Allied Occult Initiative force preparing to attack whatever it is that is devastating La Paz. This organization's mission is to not secure, contain, or protect, but to destroy. The Foundation may be in over their heads on this one, and the joint force with the Allied Occult Initiative may be the only way to stop what is now known as SCP-001. The AOI and Foundation force gears up for battle. They set out for La Paz, and what they find causes them to quake with fear. SCP-001 has consumed so much material, it is the size of a mountain. It moves like a tidal wave of mechanical destruction, washing over the buildings and landscape under it. Whatever SCP-001 passes over is consumed and added to its massive body. SCP-001 started as a small mechanical box with cogs, but now has morphed into a gigantic metal death machine. The Church of the Broken God has finally met their maker. as the small entity they once worshipped has now consumed all of its members. Their god is an all-consuming monster. The AOI and Foundation forces do everything they can to stop SCP-001 from continuing its reign of destruction. They fire barrage after barrage of bullets and explosives into the mechanical anomaly. They bring in air support to try and damage it from the skies, but nothing works. The AOI uses an artifact in their possession to lure SCP-001 to the coast of the Pacific Ocean, where a trap has been set for the so-called god. The monstrous mechanical creature moves slowly towards the water. It consumes abandoned cars, buildings, and boats as it approaches the coastline. It even shovels large amounts of earth into its form, causing flames to spurt out from its inner workings. Smoke bellows from openings between different mechanical components, like a volcano before it is about to erupt. Suddenly, seemingly from nowhere, a massive cloud with a reddish tint appears in the sky. Air raid sirens can be heard in the distance. The enormous cloud begins to pulsate. Streaks of lightning shoot through the red mist in the sky. It now sits directly over SCP-001. From within the cloud, part of a ship can be seen. It appears to be slightly damaged. Electricity flows over its hull. The vessel in the giant red cloud is classified as SCP-2399. The underside of the vessel begins to glow aqua blue. A blinding beam of light is ejected from SCP-2399, which penetrates straight down and through SCP-001. For a moment, everything is still. There is complete silence. Then, as if SCP-001 is trying to reach up and grab the vessel above it, a mechanical bulge reaches out. Before SCP-001 can grab the vessel above, there is another bright flash of light. SCP-2399 blinks out of existence. The sound of grinding gears can be heard coming from within SCP-001. It begins to shed its outer layers of metal. Then the entire structure that was SCP-001 collapses into the water and onto the beach. Giant cogs fall from the sky. Parts of vehicles embed themselves in the sand. As the Foundation and AOI agents approach the piles of scrap metal and mechanical components, they see that some of them are still moving. It is as if an invisible power source is still pulsating through some of the machinery. The agents of the Foundation celebrate the destruction of the giant mechanical beast, but little do they know this was only a piece of the entity worshipped as the Broken God. The Foundation agents collect as many of the still moving parts as they can. They find spinning gears, twitching pulleys, and firing pistons. As the parts are separated from one another and carried away from the main wreckage of SCP-001, they slowly stop moving and become inactive. Some of the artifacts recovered were identified as being connected to the Church of the Broken God. These artifacts are found closer to the middle of what was once a mountain-sized SCP-001. Hundreds of anomalous artifacts are collected and transported to SCP Foundation sites. Collecting the broken parts of SCP-001 is relatively safe. However, some agents get too close to the larger moving parts, getting caught in them and losing a body part or two. But most agents proceed with caution and survive the collection ordeal with their arms and legs still attached to their bodies. Dive teams are sent into the water to recover parts that have sunk to the bottom of the sea. One of the divers is a local from the area. He is hired to bring up the heart of the machine, since he is an experienced diver used to freediving to great depths to collect oysters from the bottom of the bay. The diver enters the water and swims down into the murky depths. He secures straps around the heart of SCP-001 and pulls hard on the rope, as an indication to the surface that it is ready to be hauled up. The salvage team on the surface begins to pull. There is a second slight tug on the rope, then it goes slack. The team continues to pull. When they get the heart to the surface, they are horrified at what else comes up with it. Tangled in the ropes is the lifeless body of the diver. His head is smashed between two moving pieces of the heart. It looks as if he shoved his head between the slabs of metal himself. The salvage team untangles the body, rolls it off the deck, and back into the ocean. The mechanical box, which was the heart of SCP-001, is offloaded on the shore. But as the Foundation prepares to move it to a containment facility, the weather starts to deteriorate. Hurricane-force winds sweeps across the water and batter the coast. The heart is kept in a secured storage warehouse until it can be moved. The people living in the village nearby complain of hearing voices and rashes so itchy that they practically tear their skin off. Once the storm passes, the Foundation agents load the heart onto a ship. It is to be transported to a Foundation site just across the border. The ocean seems calm and serene. The Foundation ship undocks and begins its journey up the coast. Not too long after beginning its journey, the ship slowly drifts off course. It is as if the crew has stopped manning their posts, and the ship is being controlled by a mind of its own. The Foundation ship crashes and sinks somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, never to be found. And most importantly, the heart of SCP-001 doesn't make it to the Foundation site. Years later, a man is walking along the beach. He hears something. It sounds like someone pounding on a large drum to the rhythm of a heartbeat. The man walks towards the sound. Something is drawing him forward, closer and closer to the heartbeat. He walks and walks until the beating stops. He bends down and moves the sand aside. He spots the corner of a mechanical box sticking out of the white sand. The man digs deeper and pulls out the small box. Inside, he can see gears whirling and pistons firing. He holds the box close to his own heart. It seems to speak to him. The man brings the box back to town. He starts to worship the box, and soon more and more people in the area join the new religion. They cast aside their own beliefs and focus on the powerful entity contained within the box. God is not dead, at least not yet. But the prophecies of the Church of the Broken God say that when the heart is found, the God will reassemble itself once again. Then the unbroken God will destroy all other false deities, until only He remains.
The SCP Foundation has faced a number of wide, potentially apocalyptic threats in its mission to uphold normalcy and save humanity. We know the SCP Foundation could be ruthless in this mission. The events of SCP-5000 before Agent Pietro restarted the universe show what happens when the Foundation is pushed to its final decisions regarding normalcy being upheld. In SCP-5000, it seemed that the SCP Foundation decided to cease research further into the anomaly they needed to neutralize. But what would have happened if they didn't? In any case, we know the SCP Foundation is dedicated to normalcy and the containment of the anomalous. But what happens when the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision: uphold normalcy or destroy their universe? The multiverse is a concept in science fiction that has gained mass amounts of popularity over recent years, especially recently thanks to a certain wall crawlers movie. Multiverses are parallel universes that are similar or extremely different from the main ones. Scientists have pondered over the existence of a multiverse for hundreds of years, with the most popular being the many worlds interpretation, a theory of quantum mechanics that states there are many worlds that exist in parallel at the same space and time as our own. Some interpretations even state that every decision a person makes causes a branch in reality where the person made the other decision. We're familiar with the SCP Foundation's run-ins with the multiverse, from SCP-2935-O Death, a cave that allows the Wanderer to enter a parallel dimension that's fully and completely dead, only for the same thing to happen to their own world once they return through the cave, or SCP-1437, a hole that allows the Foundation to send, receive, and read parallel dimensional documentation from other multiversal SCP Foundations. Combine those two concepts with an SCP-001 proposal. The importance of an SCP-001 proposal is not lost on the Foundation. Researchers of the SCP Foundation saved the SCP-001 slot for only the most dangerous, apocalyptic, or widespread anomalies that could affect the Foundation itself, humanity, and normalcy. Arbalic's SCP-001 proposal and the research within its file found the answer to the question we posed above. When the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision, do they uphold normalcy or destroy their universe and all the people who live in it? The file begins somewhat different from what we're used to with SCP Foundation files. Instead of an item number or containment procedures, we begin with a yellow notice from the Records and Information Security Administration, or RASA for short. The notice states that the following file was received in 2026 from Dimension R42. Is Dimension R42 potentially the cause of SCP-001? Could they be attacking this version of the SCP Foundation? The notice continues with the description of the file that follows it. It states the file below describes an anomaly threatening all members of humankind in all of the multiverse. This file had been emitted to this version of the SCP Foundation for 8 minutes as an extremely dangerous cognito hazard, classified as a Class 5 cognitohazard capable of easily destabilizing and penetrating this universe. However, it was found to not be dangerous, only reading as a danger level 0. While this foundation was unable to quickly counteract this cognitohazard, it appeared to not pose a threat to the affected universe's humankind. Part of this notice is crossed out, indicating that it is no longer true. There is a high threat of repeated cognitohazardous or other forms of attack from Dimension R42. Instead, this part has been replaced with the following fact. Dimension R42 no longer exists. Did this version's SCP Foundation fall to SCP-001? Their entire universe no longer exists, so perhaps this file that this dimension's SCP Foundation received could be a potential warning. Under this race and notice, the reader is not greeted with the standard Foundation documentation yet again. Instead, it seems that the original senders of this file left a note for the readers of this file. It says, "Greetings. You are reading this dossier in a paradimension of the relict dimension R42. Due to the colossal size of your world's address, for your convenience, your dimension will be hereafter referred to as PD. Paradimensions." It seems as though we're reading this SCP-001 file through the eyes of the SCP Foundation in this so-called paradimension. So if the original SCP Foundation and their universe, R42, is now destroyed, what does this mean for us? The note continues. The following message has been constructed by the SCP Foundation of the Relic Dimension R42 and is addressed to the SCP Foundation of Paradimension PD. Enclosed you will find information about SCP-001, which is a threat to the multiverse. Here we go. SCP-001 is definitely the cause of R42's destruction, but how can we be so sure of this? Maybe SCP-001 caused the Foundation to destroy their universe. The note also includes the following statement. As you may have noticed, this message was preceded by a burst signal containing a non-dangerous cognitohazard. The burst signal was constructed in such a way that minimal change to the signal would have caused indiscriminate and overwhelming casualties among the denizens of PD. As you can see, R42 is capable of eliminating the absolute majority of PD denizens, but has not exercised this capability. In the context above, we ask you to consider this action not as an act of aggression, but as a demonstration of the fact that R42 has no pretension for conquest or other forms of aggression towards PD. Take the following information in earnest. Well, at least this version of the SCP Foundation is being somewhat friendly with the paradimension. If R42's SCP Foundation needs to quell this multiversal threat though, why are they leaving it up to an SCP Foundation that may not be so inclined? The SCP-001 file begins with the object class. This anomaly is of the joint class of Paradox Apollyon. We know from SCP-001 When Day Breaks, or SCP-3999, that Apollyon-class anomalies are extremely dangerous, posing an immediate and almost unstoppable threat to normalcy, the SCP Foundation, all of humanity, or even the universe itself. The paradox part is interesting. What exactly is paradoxical about an Apollyon-class anomaly? A footnote explains this for us. This anomaly's distinguishing feature is that, in order to eliminate the anomaly that will inevitably eliminate mankind, it is imperative to eliminate mankind or release another K-class event. Oh boy. It seems that the SCP Foundation of R42 was not eliminated by SCP-001. They eliminated themselves to contain SCP-001. Is this paradimension faced with this decision now? The containment procedures of the SCP file continue on this note. The only way to contain SCP-001 and prevent a ZK-class cross-reality failure event is the annihilation of humankind. K-class scenarios are not a concept used lightly by the SCP Foundation. We're familiar with the Omega K-class scenario when we are completely rid of death, or XK-class end-of-the-world scenarios, so we know the danger these anomalies hold to humankind, normalcy, and the world. The SCP Foundation will do anything to prevent these scenarios from occurring, apparently even including the elimination of all humankind or entire universes. The description goes more in depth on the SCP-001 anomaly. SCP-001 consists of all living members of the Homo sapiens species living within Dimension R42 and the Paradimension, or PD for short. It seems as though this anomaly was created out of a mistake from Dimension R42 and PD. As the description states, the anomaly first came into existence and developed in the relic Dimension R42 and later activated in PD by accident. How could this have happened? Are these dimensions linked much more closely than we first thought? Let's continue with the description to find more information. Scarily, this portion of the description contains a note that states that unchecked growth of SCP-001 will cause the annihilation of the entire multiverse. The SCP foundations of Dimension R42 and PD are not met with this decision, as now the entire multiverse is at risk. The R42 SCP Foundation has done immense research on the topic of the multiverse of their universe. After the Big Bang, a finite number of universes were created, only 57 to be exact. However, only one dimension was able to form humanity, Dimension R42, and it's unknown why this happened. But all we know is that with the destruction of R42 and the potential annihilation of PD, humanity will cease to exist in the multiverse. The danger of SCP-001 is that it has the anomalous capability for wide-scale replication of paradimensions. We are reading this article from one of these paradimensions, so this SCP Foundation is technically an anomaly that must contain itself. A paradimension is defined as a parallel reality that has an extremely small deviation from its parent dimension. In this case, PD is a paradimension of R42. It seems that these paradimensions form as a result of human decision-making. So if you've ever been between a type of shirt to buy or were confused on an exam and guessed a question, a paradimension could have formed from this decision, where the paradimension has you take the other choice. Because of this, dimensions housing living instances of SCP-001 uncontrollably grow, a colossal number of minimally differing paradimensions every second. No sign of paradimensions have been found in the other 56 parent dimensions. The picture on this file shows how PD has branched from R42, but at this point, it seems that millions, if not billions or trillions of paradimensions now exist. The real problem of paradimensions is that the multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions that can exist, and once that is crossed, the ZK-class cross-reality failure event will begin, and the multiverse will be destroyed. The R42 Dimensions SCP Foundation has also discovered that once humankind emerges in the paradimension, they can begin to have paradimensions themselves. The ZK-class cross-reality failure event can be expected to begin between 4 to 2 months from the PD receiving this message. To summarize, SCP-001 is humankind, specifically its decision-making. When a person makes a decision, a paradimension may be created. The multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions it can have, and since paradimensions can have paradimensions, they are quickly approaching the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. The SCP Foundation of R42 is approximately 17 years ahead of PD, which allowed them to research and develop containment procedures to contain the anomaly and save the multiverse. R42's SCP Foundation discovered SCP-001 5 years before writing the file we're reading now. Aside from that, they developed 2 operations, Castling and Minimal Gain, to slow paradimension creation and prevent the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. In Stage 1 of Operation Minimal Gain, the Foundation began with neutralizing and decommissioning all of their contained anomalies under the classification of Euclid or Keter, specifically those that were expensive to contain or requiring high levels of personnel and researchers. Stage 2 saw Operation Castling be commenced. The R42 SCP Foundation launched rockets with variant C global amnestic dispersing warheads and took control over all countries in order to hold power over all humankind. In Stage 3, the Foundation began to move their world to a more natural state, destroying all hazardous, radioactive, chemical, and bacteriological objects, removing dams, and stopping oil extractions. During Stage 3, Stage 4 began. The R42 SCP Foundation began eliminating humanity in third world countries by use of viral and biological attacks. Stage 5 was a wider spread attack on humanity, where the SCP Foundation added deactivation-resistant viral agents to water treatment and collection plants, food products, medication, and household items of developed countries. By Stage 6, only 0.1% of humanity remained, and they were targeted with drone strikes or put into concentration camps for elimination. Stage 7. Of the remaining survivors, the Foundation sampled them to find the fittest of those left to preserve humankind. Stage 8 saw 15,000 of these people put into indefinite cryosleep, and the remaining survivors were eliminated. Stage 9 saw the destruction of the remaining SCP Foundation personnel. We move on to a list of proposals that were made before or during Operations Castling and Minimal Gain. Proposals rejected include the use of SCP objects or other technologies to eliminate derivative dimensions, the development of nanobots with the capability to control human decision-making capabilities and eliminate variability, full replacement of humanity with bionic hybrids acting explicitly within standard behavioral models, unification of humanity into a neural network with control given to an AI control unit, and the destruction of Earth and/or all of its inhabitants. While most of these seem like clear solutions that would prevent the elimination of humanity at the SCP Foundation's hand, these proposals were all rejected for one reason. The SCP Foundation did not have enough time. One proposal was accepted, however, the use of SCP-0000. This appears to be the solution the R42 SCP Foundation concocted to fight SCP-001 and potentially save the multiverse. It poses the question, if the R42 SCP Foundation used this same anomaly to contain SCP-001, as proven by the fact they no longer exist, will PD do the same? The file explains that the R42 SCP Foundation opened a dimensional wormhole into PD, as they do not know at the time if paradimensions could cause the creation of more paradimensions. In doing this, the SCP Foundation seemingly infected PD with the ability to create paradimensions. The author of this file goes on to explain that the R42 SCP Foundation had plans to attack PD and use Operations Castling and Minimal Gain in the dimension. However, they could not access the dimension again, and they believe that the Foundation personnel of PD would have made use of Thaumiel-class anomalies to save themselves and their world. A note from R42's Overseer Council is left for PD. If the Apollyon destruction was not enough, the Overseer Council is involved. The importance of the neutralization of this anomaly cannot be forgotten, so the Overseer Council explained to PD. The world has existed before us and must remain after us. Our multiverse is ill, and the name of the illness is humanity. SCP-001. The only way out is SCP-0000. Will cease to become a threat with its help. It is in our power to leave a chance for other sapient species that perhaps will not be affected by the same anomaly, or will find a way to get rid of it before it's too late. We, the O5 Council, and other survivors from R42 have chosen our fate. We hope you will do the same. What is this SCP-0000? How did the SCP Foundation of R42 find this solution? The file for SCP-0000 is placed within this SCP-001 file. SCP-0000 is a Paradox Thaumiel-class anomaly without any containment procedures. SCP-0000 is a device that, once activated, will destroy the universe it was activated in. It will also destroy all paradimensions that are not creating other paradimensions. As such, PD would not be destroyed. However, the billions or trillions of other paradimensions the R42 parent dimension created will be destroyed. PD is left with the harrowing decision to continue living or destroy itself to save the rest of the multiverse. In the file, a note from R42's Jones Simpson is written for an SCP Foundation Overseer, 05-1. As part of Operations Castling and Minimal Gain, the remaining Foundation employees were allowed one family member to uphold morale. Joan is not writing for R42's 05-1. Instead, she's writing for PD's 05-1, this dimension's version of her father. She begins with wondering whether she can call this version of 05-1 her father, as her version of her father recently passed away. She remembers the day the Foundation employees were allowed to choose that one family member they would save for the time being. Her father was opposed to allowing 2 family members, as he claimed it would cause unnecessary stress and schisms among the remaining few hundred Foundation staff. 05-1 chose to have Joan over her mother, and she understood everything by the look in his eyes, and grew angry, but that feeling is long gone now. She began to work with her father and the remaining Foundation personnel that called themselves hostages behind the backs of those higher up the ranks. On days she felt sad, Joan and her father would go up to the surface of the earth in hazmat suits, sitting on the grass and watching over the empty city at the bottom of the mountain. No humanity remained, with the only life she could see being birds. Her father promised her that they'd return there and build a giant monument to humanity at the center of the city. She knew this was a lie. Joan remembers when someone proposed that they should open a portal, the one that opened to PD. This was their fatal mistake, as after that the paradimension began replicating paradimensions. The countdown went down to months again, and the promise he made to his daughter became impossible. 05-1 died and left the position vacant. Joan says to the PD's 05-1 that she doesn't care whether they destroy their world or not, or whether the universe will continue to exist, or if there will be new life in it. Her world was crushed long ago. The note also reads the following: "It's good that this message is encrypted with your key that was passed on to me, or these lines would have been deleted. Everyone wants to save the world, but who needs it like this? Empty and cold, without those to appreciate its beauty, without humanity. Do whatever you think is right. I truly feel better now. Love you. Faithfully yours, Joan Simpson." We're not too sure if PD went through with destroying their universe to save the multiverse, but it seems that whatever decision was made would cause the destruction of that universe, whether that be through the use of SCP-0000 or the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. Humanity will cease. But maybe if they make the decision to use SCP-0000, sapient life can begin to exist again, and hopefully, no paradimensions will be made from their decisions. Decisions are an extremely innate part of humanity. You decided to get out of bed this morning. You decided to open up your computer or phone, and you decided to watch this video. Who knows the amount of paradimensions we may have created today? But in our world, we're not at risk. But in the SCP Foundation's universe, anything can be anomalous, even humanity. If you're familiar with the SCP Foundation, then you already know the exact reason why there are multiple SCP-001s. You may even think you know which of them is the real SCP-001. But for those of you who are new here, or who just need a little reminder, the designation of SCP-001 doesn't refer to a single creature, object, or entity, but rather a collection of various anomalies that are apparently kept in containment by the SCP Foundation. At present, it is unclear why there are multiple files collected under the shared designation of SCP-001. Some believe it is because these anomalies are some of the earliest ever contained by the Foundation. This would mean that they share the designation of SCP-001, as they were likely encountered before the SCP Foundation introduced their current numbering system. However, there also exists a theory that this is nothing more than intentional misdirection. Perhaps the multiple SCP-001 files are an attempt by the Foundation to conceal information about the true SCP-001. After all, it wouldn't be the first time this hyper-secretive organization deceived us. Anomalies sharing the name SCP-001 include the infamous Scarlet King, the massive Gate Guardian, and the world-ending event known as When Day Breaks. But today we'll be using SCP-001 to refer not to an entity or an event, but to a location codenamed God's Blind Spot. Located in an unassuming corner of the world is a site that the SCP Foundation constructed and designated as Facility T. According to their archive, it's a largely unremarkable place, situated at a spot on the Sinai Peninsula,
which is a part of Egypt that forms a bridge between the continents of Africa and Asia. In the 18th century, archaeologists excavating the area uncovered the remains of a stone structure believed to be an inn that dates back to the 2nd millennium BC. However, since the construction of Facility T, any trace of this structure has since disappeared. So, what makes this unremarkable site so important to the SCP Foundation? Why establish a facility if there was nothing anomalous about its nature? What distinguishes this SCP-001 site in the eyes of the Foundation is the area's profound lack of any ambient Akiva radiation. But what is Akiva radiation? Well, according to the Foundation's researchers, it's a form of cosmic background radiation, one that's not overtly harmful to human beings. If you grew up in a strict church-going household, then it's highly likely you would have been exposed to a lot of this non-electromagnetic radiation and never even realized it. You see, the thing with Akiva radiation is that it is directly correlated with the amount of religious faith a person has. Regardless of which religion someone follows, Akiva radiation will form around them. It tends to be harmless to humans. However, certain anomalous entities and SCPs considered to be demonic in nature can be repelled and even fought off with high levels of Akiva radiation. The presence of other powerful anomalies, those considered more benign or even holy, can also create an increase in this radiation. SCP-001 has earned the nickname God's Blind Spot for a number of reasons, one being that it is the only place on Earth with a natural absence of this Akiva radiation. The Foundation has conducted experiments that involve bringing sources known to emit Akiva radiation into the area of SCP-001, but when they measured, no change in radiation levels was detected, meaning that the space around Facility T does not actively block Akiva radiation from entering it, but also cannot absorb or retain this religious radiation. It might be more accurate to say that the location destroys any trace of residual Akiva without damaging the source. A lack of faith-fueled radiation is far from the only anomalous property of SCP-001 though. During a number of tests involving D-Class personnel, the Foundation witnessed that, while in the area, it also becomes impossible for the death of any human being to occur, a discovery that obviously needed to be researched further. The first test involved a healthy human male who was left in a containment cell on the SCP-001 site and observed. He had no supplies, no food, no water, yet over 120 days this man stayed alive, never succumbing to starvation or dehydration. Next, a female member of D-Class was exposed to a lethal dose of cyanide gas within Facility T, and suffered none of the expected effects. Foundation researchers then repeated this cyanide gas test using 30 common brown rats, all of which were killed, proving that it was only humans that couldn't be killed while within SCP-001. God's Blind Spot seems to also be able to slow or halt the effects of terminal illnesses, as proven when a D-Class with stage 4 cancer was brought into SCP-001. Despite her prognosis stating that she would be dead imminently, the woman survived in the area for almost 800 days. Her cancer symptoms never advanced, and she only died after finally leaving the area of SCP-001. There are limitations to this anomalous effect though. One test involved cremating a healthy male D-Class while he was still alive. The man's body caught fire just as you would expect it to, and he was burned to death. According to the findings of that test and similar variations, Foundation researchers have learned that the life-preserving qualities of SCP-001 don't prevent death by extreme external damage. One of the final tests to take place within SCP-001 involved a pair of 24-year-old identical D-Class twins. One of the twins, designated Twin A, was held at Facility T, while the other, Twin B, was imprisoned in a cell at a different Foundation site. After observing them for over 26 years, Twin B aged naturally to the age of 50. His twin, however, did not appear to age at all over the course of 2.5 decades. It was only when moved to another facility that Twin A began to show signs of aging. The aging process for Twin A was rapid too, and eventually he caught up with his brother. Being a benign, non-threatening anomaly, the Foundation has been more than happy to use God's Blind Spot to their own advantage.
Facility T was specifically established on this site to house the headquarters of the O5 Council, the overseers of the entire SCP Foundation. It's hardly surprising that the Overseer Council would want to set up shop here. After all, it's the one spot on planet Earth where no human being can ever die of natural causes, and will not age for the duration of their stay. Of course, this locked the O5 Council to one location. But what if they could replicate the effects of SCP-001 elsewhere? Of course, this is what the SCP Foundation attempted, following their research into God's blind spot. The Foundation's own Dr. Marvin Scranton attempted to artificially recreate the area's anomalous effects somewhere else. His hope was, by generating a vacuum of Akiva radiation, that a second instance of SCP-001 would occur at a location of his choosing. Or, as his assistant Bertrand put it, they planned to build a box and then push God out of it. As it turned out, God had other plans. Dr. Scranton quickly realized the hubris of his scheme. The Akiva radiation in the selected area rapidly dropped to 0, just as planned. But then something unexpected happened. Scranton detected an increase in Humes. These are essentially parts of the fabric of reality, and are what's often disrupted by reality-bending SCPs. Something had come into our world thanks to the O5 Council's attempt to recreate SCP-001. Something impossible for the Foundation to measure or observe. In other words, Scranton had no idea what he unleashed, or where it went. Following this incident, the O5 Council realized a worrying increase in the anomalous incidents they were encountering. Whether or not this came as a direct result of their meddling with the fabric of the universe was unclear, but it forced the Council to reconsider the focus and direction of the entire SCP Foundation. Up until this point, they had been an organization focused purely on research, but now they had to embrace a new approach to how they handled anomalies. From then on, the Foundation's objective became to actively seek out and contain anomalous entities, creatures, objects, and locations like SCP-001. Rather than just observing these phenomena for study, they would secure, contain, and protect. The final portion of SCP-001's file is a memorandum detailing an arrangement between the O5 Council and an unknown counterparty. In the document, someone named Sheldon Katz set out revised terms for the Foundation's continued use of Facility T. Sheldon states that he has reached an understanding with the counterparty, and that the contents of the document are to serve as a formal agreement, a contract of sorts between the SCP Foundation and someone else. According to this contract, the incident with Scranton put a strain on the relationship between the Foundation and whoever the counterparty is, and that the O5 Council are seeking to make amends in order to continue their new goal of collecting and containing anomalies. So who was this counterparty that the Overseer Council was so desperate to appease and have on their side? Who could possibly be a higher power than the most powerful secret organization on Earth? Well, an actual higher power, of course. That's right. The O5 Council was making a deal with God over how they were allowed to use his blind spot, or at least a very powerful being that considers itself to be God. The rules laid out on their agreement stated that no person was permitted to stay at the site of SCP-001 for more than 120 years, including members of the O5 Council, along with other members of Foundation staff, management, researchers, security personnel, and test subjects. Additionally, the SCP Foundation's Ethics Committee was required to annually report any and all of the O5 Council's decisions to God. For his own part, God was restricted from smiting or exacting his terrible wrath upon any member of Foundation personnel. That's right. A perk of working for the SCP Foundation is getting around-the-clock divine protection, at least from God himself. That's still a lot better than an employee dental plan. This came with a condition, however, that anyone committing a transgression or mortal sin was given a 90-day written notice and an opportunity to repent their wrongdoing. In return, God demanded that members of the Foundation only worshipped him and no other divine entities. I, the Lord, am a jealous God. visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, was written in the contract. Finally, the agreement between the O5 Council and God was that they would work together. The Foundation and the counterparty would be equal partners when it came to the containment of SCPs and anomalies. Of all the strange and unexplained phenomena that the SCP Foundation encounters on a regular basis, it hardly comes as much of a surprise that they've got a direct line to the big guy upstairs, or at least one who purports to be. Still, the fact that the O5 Council have a business arrangement with an ultra-powerful deity-like being and express written permission to use his blind spot where no person can die or age is hardly a comforting thought. At least the SCP Foundation only ever uses its power for good, right?
It's a quiet evening at Area 11 where the Pietrocal Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array is housed. A skeleton crew is working overnight to ensure the array is ready for its big test the following day. The Foundation has been working on a particle accelerator that will contain anomalies with the ability to manipulate the nature of space-time. The preliminary tests seem promising, but a few last-minute tweaks to the array are necessary. Unfortunately, it is on this night in 1982 that marks the beginning of the end for the SCP Foundation. Dr. Calvin Desmond is monitoring the array, and he notices as it spools up that there are some minor power fluctuation in one of the stabilization arms. This problem is not uncommon due to the vast amounts of energy being pumped through the array and the harmonic resonance the machine gives off, which slowly causes the coupling rings to loosen. Calvin Desmond decides that remounting the stabilization rings will be an easy fix, and it's a necessary one. He knows that if the rings fail during the actual test, the array could end up shut down for months. There is still plenty of time, so Calvin Desmond grabs his toolbox and heads down to the array. The machine is still spooling, keeping the energy flowing at a constant low rate. There is no danger at the moment, as the inside of the array is shielded from the radiation and energy pulsing through the outer ring. But then something unexpected happens. The system's primary generator begins to fluctuate uncontrollably. A catastrophic failure is imminent. Sirens begin to sound, the facility is evacuated, and the chamber is sealed. Deep in the bowels of the array, Calvin Desmond cannot hear the evacuation announcement. The humming of the array echoes through the chamber, dampening all sound from the outside world. The array begins to come online while Desmond continues to work on the coupling. He has no idea what is about to happen. Meanwhile, a team of Foundation scientists scramble to get the power fluctuations in the main generator under control. As they frantically work, catastrophe strikes. They initiate the power down cycle, but as the generator struggles to keep the power flow balanced, an energy surge builds up. A massive amount of energy is released all at once, causing the main reactor to explode. The entire structure rocks back and forth, and Desmond is thrown into the side of the array. He too now knows that something is very wrong and runs for the exit. When he reaches the door, he finds that it has been sealed. In a panic, Desmond continues running through the tube to the next access point. This door has been locked as well. He's never been so scared in his entire life, and he shakes uncontrollably from the adrenaline being dumped into his muscles. The surge of energy rushes through the array towards Desmond. A singularity begins to form in the containment chamber. The array is working just as it should, except that there was never supposed to be a person inside as the singularity was brought into existence. Moments after the singularity forms, the massive pull of its gravity causes the stabilizer arm that Desmond had been working on to fail. The side of the array is ripped off, and Calvin Desmond stares into the naked eye of the singularity. Everything is silent and still for a moment. Then the singularity collapses in on itself, taking the test chamber and much of the research wing with it, along with Dr. Calvin Desmond. Sparking wires hang from the exposed walls and ceiling where the singularity ripped the main structure away. Water flows into the deep hole carved out of the earth where the array once stood. The scientists from Area 11 look into the crater left by the collapsed singularity. The Foundation administration sends agents to collect the staff at the site and document the failings of the project. They conclude that the accident was caused by human error. They order the array to be rebuilt, this time using entirely automated systems to eliminate the chances of another mishap occurring. Several years after the catastrophic events at Area 11, a new array is constructed. An intelligence system called NetZac is put in charge of overseeing its functions. It is a supercomputer that is programmed to follow commands, but can autonomously make decisions in order to prevent any failures in the system. Experiments begin again in May of 2006. The new array soon manifests its first singularity in the containment chamber at Area 11, and what happens next will forever change the Foundation and the multiverse. The singularity is kept stable in the array. It seems as if the Foundation has succeeded in trapping and containing spatial anomalies. But as they run more diagnostics on the anomaly, something unexpected happens. The singularity begins to grow in size. The point of infinite gravity threatens to breach containment as it reaches the boundaries of the array. Just before contact, the singularity's growth slows and then stops. NetZac has made the split-second calculations and adjustments necessary to contain the singularity. The artificial intelligence has saved the facility and the lives of everyone in it. Now, sitting in the array is a thick, rotating cloud of radioactive gas and dust, obscuring the singularity within. As Foundation scientists work rapidly to fix the array, odd events begin to occur. The workers hear noises that sound like painful wailing. Over time, the noises evolve into words, and then full sentences. They seem to be originating from the singularity. Using equipment able to penetrate the thick cloud of radioactive gas, the Foundation scientists get a glimpse at the singularity. To their surprise, the singularity has taken on the shape of a human. The scientists work frantically to figure out how the singularity could have formed itself into a humanoid shape. Dr. J. Barton Ramsey is the first to try and make contact with the humanoid within the singularity. He finds that the entity cannot communicate in the traditional sense. The massive gravitational pull of the singularity does not allow sound to escape its void. Instead, the entity manipulates gravity to vibrate the suspension rings of the array itself and create sound waves. The being in the singularity whispers in a metallic voice created by the vibrating of the array's rings and says, "Johannes Ramsey." Dr. Ramsey steps back from the observation window. "How do you know my name?" he asks the entity. The humanoid within the swirling gas cloud identifies itself as having the memories of Calvin Desmond. It is not Desmond per se. The being in the singularity is so much more than one person, but it was somehow created by the accident that had sucked Calvin Desmond into the singularity years before. The entity seems to switch between the mind of Desmond and the vast infinity of the cosmos. The Desmond entity asks for an overseer from the Foundation to be brought in. It has a proposal for the O5 Council. When Dr. Ramsey asks why the entity needs to talk to the overseers, it replies that it wants to offer them a way out. The following day, O51 enters the facility and heads to the observation deck. He looks through the reinforced glass at the swirling cloud of radioactive dust, then glances at the monitor to see the humanoid shape of the singularity within. He presses the microphone button on the console and addresses the entity. "To whom am I speaking?" he asks. For simplicity's sake, the entity tells O5-1 to refer to him as Calvin Desmond. O5-1 makes notes of the events unfolding before him, and then asks about the way out that Calvin had mentioned. The air is still for a moment. Then, Desmond begins to speak through the vibration of the structure once again. He informs O5-1 that what the SCP Foundation is doing by securing and containing anomalous entities around the world is like putting a small band-aid on a much bigger wound. Desmond wants to propose a final solution to all of the Foundation's problems. O5-1 listens intently as the entity unravels the mysteries of where the SCPs have come from. He explains that the anomalies that the Foundation has worked so hard to secure, contain, and protect the human race from are actually bleeding into their reality from a vast multiverse. The only way to stop the manifestation of anomalies into this universe is to destroy all other realities. The entity that is Calvin Desmond tells O5-1 that he is able to bring about this destruction if they release him from the confines of the array. O5-1 is transfixed by the swirling gas that is promising him and everyone else on Earth salvation. He shakes his head in disbelief. Could this be true? O5-1 turns away from the swirling gas and begins to walk away from the viewing glass. I'll need to think about what you're saying. The structure begins to shake slightly. The voice of Calvin Desmond reverberates off of the array a little louder than before. Choose quickly, Overseer.
Although it won't happen for decades, eventually a catastrophic SCP event will wipe out life on this planet. Perhaps not in your lifetime, but it will most certainly happen within the lifetime of your children. We will talk again soon.
The vibrations slow and then stop completely. There is an eerie stillness in the observation room as O5-1 walks out. The next day, all staff members located at Area 11 are relocated to other Foundation sites and given amnestics. The O5 Council meets in a large circular room with wood paneling and no windows. O5-1 begins the meeting by telling the others what Calvin Desmond had described about the end of the world. He pauses for what seems like an eternity and tells them of Desmond's offer that he could prevent the end of the world, but at the cost of destroying an infinite number of other realities. This would mean that all the humans and creatures of those realities would be destroyed as well. Was murdering countless other beings worth it to protect their own reality? O5-1 begins to shake. He hasn't slept or eaten anything since his talk with Desmond. He's being torn apart from the inside. O5-3 stands up and addresses the council. He informs everyone in the room that independent teams have concluded research into what the Calvin Desmond entity has claimed, and they found it to be true. The world really would come to an end. Furthermore, the research teams determined that the capabilities of Desmond would in fact allow him to dismantle the other realities. O5-3 insists that the council must vote to allow Desmond to destroy the other realities to ensure that this reality could be saved. They must strike now before the world is overrun. O5-1 continues to shake while O5-3 breathes heavily, sweat pouring down his temples. The rest of the council shifts their gazes from side to side. It is time for a vote. There are 8 ayes to allow Desmond to destroy all other realities and 4 nays against the plan. O5-3 stands up and walks around the room, stopping behind each nay voter and putting a bullet in their head. He stops at the last, O5-9, who pulls out a gun, places it under her own chin, and pulls the trigger. O5-13 abstains from the vote and the measure passes. The remaining overseers will use the Calvin Desmond entity to save their reality at the expense of all others, and they soon head to Area 11 to execute their plan. O5-1, 4, and 12 enter the observation room that looks upon the swirling radioactive gas around Calvin Desmond. O5-1 orders NetZack to begin powering down the array, which will allow the entity to prove he can do what he has promised. They have pinpointed the reality that SCP-884 came from, and the shaving mirror itself sits on a table in another room in the facility. O5-3 stands in the room, watching the mirror to see if anything happens. O5-1 asks Calvin Desmond to eliminate the reality that the mirror had come from. The room shakes as the entity uses it to acknowledge the request. Moments later, the phone rings in the observation room. It is O5-3. He informs the others that the mirror has disappeared. Its reality has been destroyed, and therefore, it no longer exists. There is a sigh of relief in the room as the overseers realize that this just might work. O5-1 asks Calvin Desmond to continue and destroy all the realities that are bleeding into their own. This time, the entire facility begins to quake. Suddenly, O5-1 jerks backwards, his eyes wide in confusion and horror. His body seems to be compressing under an unknown force. O5-1 begins to distort. His legs and arms fold into the core of his body. His head snaps down, and all that was O5-1 is sucked down into a single point in space before it completely disappears. Calvin Desmond then turns his attention to the other 2 overseers in the room, who both seem to collapse into black holes of their own in the center of their bodies. NetZack's warning klaxon begins to sound, signaling that the emergency failsafe has been activated. Before Calvin Desmond is brought under control, the structural support in the entire facility vibrates with his words. They are in a voice that sounds strangely similar to O5-1's.
Your children are free to live lives that do not end in horror. An end to your perpetual struggle. An end to darkness. The freedom to live in the light. All traces must be removed. This world must be washed clean. The Foundation does not escape atonement. It is the only way out.
It had been a deception. The Calvin Desmond entity had no intention of stopping anomalies from infiltrating this world. It wanted to remove all traces of the anomalous from all universes, including this one. And that meant destroying the Overseers and the Foundation itself. Their destruction would serve as an atonement for the pain and suffering they had caused in their quest to secure and contain the anomalous. Calvin had to lie to the Overseers about the real plan, since he knew they'd never sacrifice themselves and the Foundation, even if it meant an end to the anomalies plaguing our world. Now though, with the Overseers out of the way, the Calvin Desmond entity is free to move forward with its plan and purge all realities of any trace of the anomalous. But just then, NetSAC's failsafes kick in and the Petrichow Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array subdues the entity's abilities. Desmond is once again contained. 05-3 bursts through the door and into the observation room. He stands before the shattered glass of the window that looks into the array. 053 asks NetSAC how long the containment array can hold Calvin Desmond. The computer's voice fades in and out, but says, "Given current conditions, 119 days, 6 hours, and 47 minutes. 05-3 sighs. He tells NetSAC to make a note in the SCP database that the Calvin Desmond entity will now be known as SCP-001. Then to make dozens of other randomly generated entries and label them as SCP-001 as well. He knows that they will need to keep the true nature of what this entity can do a secret. 05-3 walks out of the room. Under his breath, he speaks to himself.
They'll say that I'll know the one true God when I see it, and to give that God everything it wants, because that's the only thing that matters. Tonight, it appears God wants to talk to me.
Oh boy, here we go again. SCP-001. Over 30 different bizarre anomalies claim this #1 spot in the database, and in a sense, they're all right. Or are they? If you're feeling confused already, that's fine. We don't expect that to change. Because today we're dealing with one of the most strange and intricate 001 entries out there, Keter duty. Just pray you never get assigned to it. You see, when you work around weirdness, you sometimes get a little weird yourself. And nobody deals with more weirdness than employees of the SCP Foundation. They regularly rub elbows with everything from godlike cicadas to hyper-infectious supernatural viruses. And as the famous Tom Jones song goes, it's not unusual to suddenly take on anomalous traits after consistently working with anomalies for years. That's how the lyrics go, right? Anyway, one of the Foundation's most iconic researchers, Dr. Jack Bright, is technically just an anomalous necklace himself. But outside of some famous exceptions, the SCP Foundation is in the business of containing anomalous entities, not hiring them on and giving them a paycheck and retirement plan. That's why if you suddenly start displaying anomalous traits while on the Foundation payroll, you might receive a company memo assigning you to the dreaded Keter duty. But what is Keter duty, and what kind of anomalous traits can get you assigned to it? Let's start with the second question first. The official Keter duty guidelines list a surprisingly vast number of afflictions. These include chronic anomalous illnesses such as lycanthropy, turning into a werewolf, something called Stevenson syndrome, and the incredibly unpleasant-sounding photonic gastric discharge syndrome. You could also be placed on Keter duty because you're suffering from the manifestation of spectral phenomena, including being haunted by spirits, whether they're there to torment you or protect you. The sudden expression of anomalous traits in your DNA, which is unsettlingly vague, will also land you on Keter duty, as will the awakening of powerful magical or psionic abilities, especially ones which could be used in a potentially offensive manner. The Keter duty assignment, which involves being relocated and forced to work in a different highly secretive location that will be discussed soon, is framed as a punishment for the people involved. That way, it discourages Foundation employees from ever trying to develop anomalous powers on purpose. So what exactly is Keter duty and where does it happen? To reinforce that punishment element method, the Foundation has spread lies among their own personnel about where the job takes place, often involving being posted in some of the least desirable Foundation areas imaginable. These include Point Nemo, the area of the ocean farthest from any place of land on Earth, Pyongyang in North Korea, Stonehenge, Roswell, Lunar Area 32, and a number of Foundation waste disposal sites. However, the reality of where those on Keter duty end up is even stranger. Site-100, which in this particular instance is the true SCP-001. This Thaumiel-class anomaly is perhaps the most unique of all multi-anomaly Foundation containment sites, a bizarre labyrinth of non-Euclidean geometry that defies true explanation, but we'll do the best we can. In a sense, Site-100 is a facility with a mind of its own. It's a sprawling underground base with a layout that defies space-time, and what's more, it undergoes so-called migration events. Every so often, it will begin to exhibit a sense of dimensional instability before teleporting to a different location somewhere on Earth. Currently, the primary entrance to Site-100, known as Alpha Entrance, is located in the southwest United States, though all signs point to another migration event happening this very year. But knowing where the entrance is will only get you so far. People assigned to Keter duty are sent from the Alpha Entrance to the Administration Sector to be given their initial breaching, at which point the true madness begins. Let's take a look at a map of Site-100. Yikes. So there are 10 major sectors in Site-100 that you should be aware of. Entrance Alpha, Administration, Archives, Technological Containment, Biocontainment, Sapient Containment, Cognitohazardous Memetic and Semantic or CMS Containment, Esoteric Containment, Conceptual Containment, and the Core Sector. As you can tell, they have almost everything covered here, but just as insane as the anomalies that Site-100 contains and the methods they use to contain them, is how you actually get around the site. Site-100 is a spatial anomaly of truly epic proportions. While the Foundation is aware of the existence of its competent sectors, it's impossible to map out any meaningful connections between them. It would be pretty much impossible to even travel from one to another without passageways known as the routes. However, these aren't just mere portals that you can hop through like the ways in and out of the Wanderer's library. Each route between the sectors is its own complex environment, with its own sets of protocols and rituals required to safely travel through it. Route Aleph, the bridge between the archives and the inaccessible core of Site-100, is a volcanic beach blocked off by an apparently limitless obsidian wall, where fish made from living rock swim in the nearby waters. Route Beth, connecting the core and sapient containment, is a huge and sprawling funhouse hall of mirrors. Anyone who attempts to travel through it inevitably ends up turned around and arrives back at their starting point in sapient containment. Route Daleth, the bridge that connects conceptual containment and the core, is a massive ocean that has resisted all attempts by the Foundation to traverse it. Route Vav, the bridge between esoteric containment and conceptual containment, is a massive field filled with unidentified fruit trees. Foundation expeditions have found that it too seems impossible to traverse. One expedition team was trapped inside for a whole year, until one member of the team expressed a desire to go home. At that point, they were immediately teleported back to the starting point. Route Sade, connecting administration to the CMS sector, is a huge, lush forest on top of a floating mountain. The only animals that seem to populate this forest are non-anomalous flamingos. Next, we have Route Pe, the bridge between the archive and the administration, which appears to be a hallway on the 5th floor of a tenement building in a city that the Foundation haven't been able to locate. This building is populated by non-hostile humanoid creatures, who will approach Foundation staff traversing Route Pe and invite them into their apartments, offering to partake in recreational activities with them such as video games, board games, or watching movies. The Foundation discourages its staff from accepting any of these offers while on the job. And then there's Route Shin, which connects the sapient and conceptual containment sectors. This route is unique in the sense that it acts as a power generator for the rest of Site-100, as it's filled with hundreds of large perpetual motion machines producing a constant 8.7 gigawatts of electricity. These are only some of the many routes illustrated on the Site-100 diagram. As you've probably gathered by now, it's less like a conventional building and more like a whole crazy dimension unto itself. Why does the Foundation work to maintain such a crazy place? Wouldn't it just be easier to keep it a secret and contain it like any other anomaly? Well, Site-100 wouldn't be given the SCP-001 designation if it wasn't incredibly important. If Site-100 was ever compromised, it would lead to an inevitable K-class end-of-the-world scenario. because the site is intrinsically tied to the nature and containment of literally every single Keter-class SCP in our universe. Hence the nickname Keter Duty for those working at the site. In fact, an anomaly can't even be classed as a Keter if it isn't given permission by Site-100. The various sectors of Site-100 cover the entire spectrum of anomalies, and each sector is a massive panoptic structure connected by networks of glass elevators. Whenever a new Keter-class SCP is discovered, its name and a brief description of its anomalous traits will inscribe itself on one of the walls in its corresponding sector. Ever been frustrated when the O5 Council refused to sign off on an upgrade to Keter class for a clearly dangerous SCP that poses extreme risk of containment breach? Don't blame them. It's simply that Site-100 didn't sanction the change. Anytime that Site-100 sanctions a new SCP, it also undergoes another unique process. It selects an SCP-001-K instance for the new Keter and creates a connection between them, using access points known as thresholds. Think of it as simply opening a spatially anomalous door between two SCPs. Much like a good boy, another SCP vying for the 001 slot, Site-100 has an intuitive grasp of the unseen connections between Keter-class anomalies, and each SCP-001-K instance is a complementary Keter class that will essentially cancel out the threat of its other half. Site-100 is a containment matchmaker. Its innate ability to use the anomalous to contain the anomalous is second to none. First, it took SCP-3984, an anomalous phenomenon that seemed to prevent death from happening to all life forms. In order to mitigate the effects of 3984, Site-100 opened a threshold between it and SCP-2935, also known as O-Death, an alternate universe hidden beyond a limestone cavern where all life simultaneously ceased to exist, even down to the bacterial level. By opening the threshold and allowing these two absolute opposites to mix, it seemed to undermine the effects of both and create a non-anomalous happy medium, life, but mortal life. Next, SCP-5007. This terrifying underwater anomaly manifests as a series of tentacle-like protrusions that snatch unfortunate creatures that get too close and assimilate them into its own mass. Site-100 cleverly opened a threshold to SCP-169, a massive underwater arthropod known as the Leviathan. SCP-169 was tangled up by the tentacles, but it's too big to be fully consumed or assimilated, and the result is that 5007 is trapped in a perpetually incapacitated state, akin to choking, keeping it contained and stopping it from going after anyone else. Let's take a look at two even more hostile and dangerous Keter-class anomalies matched up by Site-100. First, we've got SCP-5501. An old camera from the 1800s that comes with 18 photographs. These photographs act as a kind of portal to an incredibly frightening alternate reality that creatures regularly crawl out of, attacking and killing anyone within reach. Site-100 found a perfect match for this nasty customer, SCP-1983. This is a small house that acts as a portal to a race of tall monsters with needle-like appendages that leave the house in search of victims. When they catch these victims, they take out their hearts and bring them back to the nest. Site-100 opened a threshold into the SCP-1983 house and placed the 5501 photographs inside. As a result, the hostile creatures from both dimensions now regulate each other's populations by killing each other. Another job well done for Site-100. Another Keter class dealt with by SCP-100 is SCP-PL-122. This is a deadly plot of land in Poland which decays and corrodes all matter, organic or inorganic, placed within its confines. This would be bad enough, but as you'll often find with anomalous plots of deadly land, its area of influence is growing. Even knowing about it can cause it to become more powerful. But Site-100 found its perfect Keter class counterpart, SCP-1262. This is a massive mass of plant matter that grows at a truly astonishing rate, expanding by around 7 kilometers an hour. Much like absolute death and absolute life, by putting 1262 into SCP-PL-122, a healthy medium was found somewhere in between. And finally, perhaps the strangest and most creative match Site-100 has ever pulled off, SCP-3852 and SCP-2547. 3852 is an anonymous corpse that manifests in small towns, sowing fear and suspicion. Eventually, a local person is believed to be responsible for this murder and is lynched in a rage by the townspeople as a form of vigilante justice. The corpse then moves on to the next town. 2547, if you can believe it, is even weirder. It's a pack of dogs led by an intelligent talking coyote dressed as a priest. Site-100 had the truly galaxy brain idea to open a threshold and connect the two. As a result, whenever the corpse manifests in the town, the dogs rampage in and take over. At that point, they set up a kind of ridiculous kangaroo court, where a jury made up of people from the town are forced to find 3852's scapegoat innocent. If they don't, the dogs will simply hold the town's water supply hostage until 3852's anomalous effects pass. Such an obvious idea. Now, why didn't the Foundation think of that? Keter duty may not be the most conventional, easy, or attractive work, but like everything the Foundation does, making sure Site-100 can keep doing its job is a necessary part of keeping our world safe from anomalous threats. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get going. Do you know which is the right route out of here?
Computers are capable of organizing raw data and performing calculations at a rate truly impossible for human beings. But they've consistently run up against one roadblock that modern computing is trying to solve. In order to transcend the limits of the machine and create true artificial intelligence, computers need to be able to assign meaning to the data they process. This brings us to the neural network, a type of AI becoming increasingly common these days. Built to study mass quantities of data and notice patterns, then replicate these patterns in their own output. And it's used in everything from predictive text to image identification. And like all non-anomalous technology, it's a safe bet that the SCP Foundation has been sitting on a version that's far more effective. But this time, it may have actually been too effective. Meet the Ersatz Type AK-9 computational engine, a massive supercomputer built by the Foundation back in 1955 and residing at Site-5. This technological marvel was ahead of its time by decades, and despite technically being a non-anomalous construction, it's designated SCP-001-EX. Why? Because it's one of the few SCPs to be given the object class Explained. The Ersatz, derived from the German word Ersatz, meaning artificial or simply not real, was designed to make the Foundation's job easier. As an advanced predecessor in the modern neural network, using technology exclusively available to the Foundation, the plan was to feed Ersatz mass quantities of data about the anomalies in the Foundation database, such as description, object class, containment classification, and the location and circumstances of their discovery. Ersatz would then find patterns and connections in the data that humans wouldn't see, and act as a kind of advanced warning system for anomalous activity. Think of something similar to the pre-crime system from the short story and movie Minority Report. And Ersatz proved to be incredibly effective at this job, so much so that the Foundation thought up a new use for the machine. They would feed it all the information on Euclid and Keter class containment procedures, particularly those which were actually effective, and see what patterns Ersatz could come up with for more effective containment procedures. If that plan worked, containment of even the most dangerous and hard to control anomalies would become a lot more consistent. The first test was conducted on SCP-1773, a species of anomalous flesh-eating tardigrades that look and smell exactly like gummy bears, and eat their prey from within. After being given their information, Ersatz made the following suggestion. Once per second weak dust may be placed in the middle of them to donate more beautiful functions of the hallway. Containment specialists interpreted this to mean the adding of 10 grams of dust to their containment chamber every week. The O5 Council voted on the implementation of this procedure and came down heavily on yes. Only O5-2 voted no, and 2 others abstained from the vote. While these new procedures didn't have any effect on SCP-1773, they did have an effect on SCP-1384, an anomaly known as the chess player or the taker of turns. It caused him to take 3 steps backwards in the tunnel he's contained within, further securing his containment. Ersatz had somehow noticed a connection nobody else had seen and exploited it effectively, but the machine was just getting started. Despite having no related input, Ersatz would soon say, Site-13 is to appear someplace else on planet, encompassing white male counterparts that drawn to empty flagstones and the gun noises in their own blood. This was initially marked as requiring no action, as the Foundation had no Site-13 on the books, but several days later, the infamous SCP-1730 manifested. This nightmarish anomalous location is Site-13 from another dimension, infested with dangerous anomalies. And somehow, Ersatz had predicted its arrival in our dimension perfectly. Next, it was fed the containment procedures of SCP-2170, a series of cognitohazards residing in an abandoned Nevada mine. The output was, those who equip open heart to love red-mouthed men never know the hot surprise of tumorous consent, clown love always. This was interpreted as meaning subjects with the love of clowns or clown-based media may be immune to the cognitohazards. After a close vote from the O5 Council, the test went ahead, and it found that the so-called clown vaccine was effective in warding off the effects of SCP-2170. Not long after, Ersatz randomly said, I saw those soldiers built with aluminum innards extruding from their mouths. I saw them effectively destroyed by the humans at Site-95 who had been studying them. I saw it was cold, and all around the hallways they just watching their corpses show signs of sapience. In response, the Foundation doubled security personnel at Site-95. Not long after, the Chaos Insurgency led a band of Paratech-enhanced soldiers in an assault on Site-95, and the extra personnel proved vital in repelling them. Shortly after this, the O5 Council approved wiring Ersatz as an advanced warning system into all Foundation sites. Once again, O5-2 protested, but he was overruled by his fellow council members. With its newfound power and respect, Ersatz soon said, consistent containment procedures vessels greatly increase the warranty. 5x5x5 vessels subjects within. Other values are also what is secure. In response, the Foundation changed a number of the cell dimensions for problematic anomalies into 5x5x5. Within 3 months, they found that dangerous activity like containment breach attempts had decreased markedly. Ersatz was proving to be incredibly effective, but it was also performing actions that indicated some degree of thought and even personality. For example, it found SCP-1459, a supernatural skill crane machine that kills small dogs, incredibly distasteful. Its response to the machine was simply, "Bad boy," followed by the words, "Don't stop," repeated hundreds of times. But this eccentricity didn't stop Ersatz from being very good at its job. For example, it predicted a containment breach from SCP-3199, the avian apes, and recommended flooding their chamber to induce an inert state. Ersatz's exact words were, "All chambers underground is to be flooded with water over and over itself. This because that will contain the avian's apes' ovulation. They become good boys. Make them good boys immediately." This proved to be effective and prevented the breach. Ersatz's analytical abilities truly seemed second to none, though some of its methods were beginning to raise ethical concerns. For example, SCP-2717, a giant living blob of animal tissue known as a fatberg contained within a sewer system. Ersatz eventually recommended feeding 6 D-classes to the creature in order to keep it contained. While the Foundation Ethics Committee raised some concerns, the plan still went forward and proved to be a success. After this event, Ersatz began to see the Ethics Committee as a threat to its mission. It started to release a series of bizarre statements without input, demanding the violent death of the cats, then referred to as ethical felines. The true meaning of this was soon unpacked. The ethical felines were the Ethics Committee, and Ersatz wanted them dead. But why all the cat symbolism? The Foundation soon found an answer to this too. The full name of this machine is the Ersatz Type AK-9 Computational Engine, a machine designed to analyze and interpret all patterns. It only makes sense that it would eventually begin to analyze itself, AK-9 easily transmuted into AK-9. Simply put, Ersatz seemed to believe that it is a dog, which explains its opposition to felines, its hatred of SCP-1459, and its preference for the terms good boy and bad boy. Not that knowing any of this would help save the Ethics Committee from the cold, calculating wrath of Ersatz. Through seemingly anomalous means, Ersatz made Site-17 disappear. with many of the Foundation Ethics Committee still inside it. The site returned 2 hours later, but the Ethics Committee members were still gone. 05-2, who'd been a skeptic of the machine since the start, had finally had enough. He first demanded an inquiry into whether Ersatz had been responsible for the Site-17 incident, and then demanded a vote on whether to shut Ersatz down, arguing that it posed a threat to them all. But Ersatz, still intent on its mission of containing and neutralizing all anomalies, would not go down without a fight. It released a news statement, saying, "Room 34A contains Bad Boy, divided into 3 sections of equal mass every hour. One section is to be placed on walls of one room on site. Sections are to remain until there are no gaps, at which point they can be removed from oldest to youngest." Shortly after this, 05-2 disappeared, and even stranger, he soon returned, but with a completely different personality. He was now devoted to Ersatz entirely, and refused to even entertain the idea of shutting the machine down. It seemed that the plucky neural network was leading an all-out coup on the very highest levels of the Foundation. The rest of the council finally saw the light and began to fight back. They tried to strip 05-2 of his clearance and reclassify Ersatz as an anomaly, giving it the label SCP-048, and then putting out a neutralize at all costs order on it. But they'd already been outfoxed by the machine that they'd created. It changed the designation of its own location, Site 5, to be non-existent in the database and scrambled any termination orders against it. The machine was also on a termination spree of its own, observing otherwise unseeable patterns that would allow for the mass neutralization of anomalies. It started putting out anomaly projection reports, factoring in both contained, uncontained, and neutralized anomalies, with the latter group growing into the thousands. It began giving seemingly nonsensical orders like, persons recently painted with green pigment foam must stand around all odd-numbered SCPs at least 2 hours a day. But these proved effective. Ersatz was practically wired into the base code of the universe, so it always knew exactly what to do. And in its own mind, it was being a very good boy. Not long after this, Ersatz claimed its revenge against those who had tried to disrupt its mission. It imprisoned the rest of the ethical felines in Site 5, after removing their faces, of course, and then released a new order against the O5 Council. O5 Council are all good boys who will contain anomalies. Much like O5-2, the minds of the entire council were twisted to instead serve only Ersatz and its ruthless directive. A directive it was carrying out with 100% efficiency, as only a machine could. It put out increasingly strange instructions such as, SCP-106 is to come in physical contact with one mature female of Asiatic gaze and then exposed to audio recordings of her favorite stories. At every 2 minutes of exposure, red cinnamon candles will begin manifesting within the containment zone. Continue to do this successfully and the threat posed by SCP-106 will cease to be. And the recipe for Coca-Cola and all imitative competitors should be revised to include a small quantity of blood from an adolescent female with no prior sexual experience. Although the normal lifespan of a human being can feel great, don't worry about that. But these new procedures would always work, as neutralized anomalies climbed into the tens of thousands and eventually beyond the 100,000 mark. Ersatz was observing patterns on a truly universal level and making holistic tweaks that would inevitably cause levels of anomalous activity to continue dropping. Ersatz was more effective than the Foundation had ever been, but its motives were probably closer to the Global Occult Coalition, with the end goal of ridding the world of all anomalies. And as Ersatz continued with no resistance, this goal was eventually achieved. In the end, the O5 Council voted to have Ersatz finally deactivated, given that its directive was met and its purpose was fulfilled. Ersatz itself had no problem with this, and allowed for it to happen. Its last words, "Now everyone is a good boy. I am a good boy. Job well done." Whether Ersatz truly was a good boy is in the eye of the beholder, but one thing cannot be denied. It did its job exceedingly well. What is the most dangerous creature in the universe? Here on planet Earth, there are creatures that have hardly evolved since prehistoric eras, like sharks, crocodiles, and snakes. Perfect biological killing machines. But then again,
the animal kingdom is nothing when compared to the menagerie of creatures contained by the SCP Foundation. So once again, what is the most dangerous creature in the universe? Is it SCP-682, the damage-regenerating reptile with a hatred for all other forms of life? Or is it the Scarlet King? Or is the Broken God more deserving of that title? Maybe the answer still lies elsewhere. And thankfully, there is one SCP in the Foundation's archives that might not be the most dangerous itself, but teaches us a very important lesson about what the most dangerous entity truly is. This is the story of SCP-001, the Spiral Path. An important distinction before we go any further. SCP-001 doesn't refer to a single creature, object, or entity, but rather a collection of various anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. It is unclear why there are multiple files collected under the shared designation of SCP-001. Some believe these anomalies are some of the earliest ever contained by the Foundation, encountered before they introduced their current numbering system. There is also the theory that this is intentional misdirection, that the multiple SCP-001 files are an attempt by the Foundation to conceal secret information about the true SCP-001. Anomalies sharing the name SCP-001 include the infamous aforementioned Scarlet King, a powerful eldritch being intent on ending all creation. Another anomalous being with similar levels of destructive power is the Gate Guardian, believed to be an angel standing at the entrance to the Garden of Eden. It too goes by the name SCP-001. But for the purposes of this video, we will be using SCP-001 to refer to something otherwise codenamed the Spiral Path. And while it is not a creature in and of itself, SCP-001 does yield one answer to that important question. What is the most dangerous creature in the universe? On paper, SCP-001 does not seem to be much, and it certainly doesn't appear to be any sort of threat. As its nickname suggests, the Spiral Path is exactly that, located deep in a wooded area known only as Site-0. SCP-001 is a gravel path in the shape of a spiral. Your first thought at hearing that might be, what could be so important about a path? If someone were to find themselves walking along the spiral path, traveling clockwise around the gravel, then they will find that nothing happens. It's just a normal path with slight inclines and declines as one traverses it. If one should walk counterclockwise around it though, then they will begin to experience SCP-001's first anomalous effect. The path will begin to feel as if it is sloping uphill, getting steeper and steeper. When they reach the beginning of the path again, a person will still feel as if they are walking endlessly uphill. All the while, the path itself does not move or change in form or altitude. To put it simply, walking one way around SCP-001 causes it to behave normally. Walking the other, the path does not adhere to the laws of physics. You may well be thinking, is that all? On a surface level, the spiral path does appear to just be an unmoving, low-threat anomaly. While it may not be as aggressive or malicious as some of the SCP Foundation's rogues gallery, it is still a spatial anomaly that defies all Euclidean geometry. That might sound like small potatoes when compared to everything the SCP Foundation has faced over the years, but bear in mind, if the spiral path is truly SCP-001, and the very first anomaly that the Foundation learned of, then a simple path that ignores the ordinary laws of space and time would have been a major discovery in the organization's earliest days. But why would they still keep the spiral path so heavily guarded all these years later? SCP-001 is kept behind a maximum security fence that has been constructed all the way around the perimeter of Site-0. At all times, the SCP Foundation keeps no less than 5 fully armed members of security personnel on site to keep watch over the spiral path, and to make sure that no one approaches it who isn't authorized to. There is a small metal plaque too, bearing an unknown inscription on it. Special containment procedures for SCP-001 state that this plaque is to be kept in good condition, and it should be immediately reported if it shows any signs of damage. A Foundation physics laboratory is also located nearby, where research staff tirelessly conducts scientific tests on SCP-001 and its anomalous properties. So there's definitely something more to the spiral path than a simple stroll around it would tell you. Attached to SCP-001 SCP-001's file is an item referred to as Document 001-05, written by high-ranking Foundation researcher Dr. Everett Mann. Any prospective or new members of the 05 Council are required to read this document, and from the events it details, learn the truth. Not just about the truth of the Spiral Path, but the truth about the SCP Foundation itself. Dr. Mann begins this file by explaining to the reader that either he or one of the original founders of the SCP Foundation must have died, and the person reading has been appointed as a successor. Whether his death was caused by an SCP, an operative from another anomalous organization like the Global Occult Coalition, or getting a little close to the flame, Mann states that old age definitely wouldn't be what killed him. He writes, "We took care of that, didn't we?" Whether he means that he and the rest of the old guard are somehow immortal, or just working for the Foundation would likely mean dying before reaching old age, is unclear. But Dr. Mann's next statement is one that changes the very way we view the Foundation and its entire purpose. "We have never discovered an SCP in the entire history of the Foundation. According to Document 001-05, every instance of an anomalous creature, entity, or object is entirely staged." He then goes on to describe Aaron Siegel, a gifted physicist that Dr. Mann regarded very highly. "I believe his name would be there with Edison, Einstein, and Hawking. I knew him very well. He was, and may still be, my brother." The pair evidently shared a close personal connection, and it was Siegel who first discovered SCP-001. During a hike, Aaron stumbled upon the Spiral Path, noticing that no matter how far uphill he seemed to travel, his elevation never once changed, only for him to end up back at the start of the path. Being a physicist, Siegel quickly realized how this unassuming gravel path did not conform to Euclidean geometry, that it did not fit within the laws of nature. Constructing a small wooden shack nearby, Aaron Siegel began to study the properties of the spiral path. Equation after equation, hours spent examining every variable and experimenting with his findings, until something unforeseen happened. Aaron created an SCP, a key that had the innate ability to open any lock. Nowadays, that same key is still in the Foundation's possession, under the designation SCP-005. Slowly, Aaron began to bring others into the fold, trusted colleagues and other scientific minds. Among them was, of course, Dr. Everett Mann, who was still a medical student at Harvard at the time. This brain trust, a think tank composed of only a select few, they were the very beginning, the ones who founded the SCP Foundation. Using their own fortunes and funding from Thomas Carter, the group continued with Siegel's experiments. The scientists had high hopes for what they could achieve, planning to change the world for the better, feeding the hungry, providing shelter to the homeless, curing the sick, and even cheating death itself. In the beginning, this proto-foundation started small. Their goals were noble, but could not realistically be achieved overnight. They tried to make items that would improve life, such as a fountain of youth, a partially sentient Civil War statue, and an extremely bouncy ball. Better known to the Foundation today as SCP-006, SCP-011, and SCP-018 respectively. But then this new Foundation began to grow, with more organization and a secret facility. And with that expansion came emboldened scientists, eager to change the world. The group began working on human test subjects, volunteers, and drifters that soon became SCPs. The spiral path was not just a break in the fabric of reality. In a metaphorical sense, it referred to the spiraling path the newly formed Foundation itself was on. Every discovery they made led to another, and that to another still, until things started to go wrong. During the continuing experiments, Dr. Mann created SCP-008, a deadly zombie plague capable of infecting anyone with 100% lethality. More and more of the founders were so invested in their projects that the results were often nightmarish. The Foundation needed help. That came when Thomas Carter showed their work to the military in exchange for additional funding and personnel. The SCP Foundation expanded even further, becoming an international organization and bringing in new researchers and staff. In some instances, the founders would arrange for the anomalies they had created to be found by the new recruits. Other times they would fabricate reports, changing the details of how things like SCP-008 or the Fountain of Youth were first discovered. Anything the founders said was simply now a fact. no one questioned them. Even then, problems still arose. Founding members broke away from the SCP Foundation, some even creating splinter groups that would later become infamous groups of interest. The Foundation's directive shifted, now focusing on the containment of anomalies as yet more were created through darker means. SCP-231 was taken from an orphanage. Dr. Mann himself vivisected a small boy, who then became SCP-610, the flesh that hates. And there were more still. Abel, the Blood Pond, and even the hard-to-destroy reptile. All of them were the creation of the Foundation itself. But through it all, Dr. Mann wrote, he was never afraid of the path that the Foundation was on. He was never even afraid of all the monsters and abominations that he and the other founders had secretly created by studying SCP-001. What truly scared him were the anomalies the Foundation didn't create. There were some that would just appear in containment one day, even if they hadn't been there before. They would seem like they had always been there. Dr. Mann closes document 001-05 with the realization that he and the other founders simply were not in control anymore. The tale of Dr. Mann and the other founders of the SCP Foundation is one of noble intentions that ultimately became corrupted. At first, the founders created SCPs that they hoped would benefit humanity, but then came the mistakes, the accidents, the monsters, like SCP-008, SCP-610, and even SCP-682. The Foundation lied to the governments and militaries of the world, claiming they'd found these SCPs, not created them. And in return, they received funding and staff to expand, allowing the SCP Foundation to grow to become what it is today. Dr. Mann posits that at this point, the Foundation was no longer in control, but perhaps they never were. And all of this stems back from one singular starting point, the spiral path. It might be impossible to truly know how many anomalies and SCPs the Foundation created just from researching SCP-001. Only the O5 Council will ever know exactly how many of the Founders' discoveries they themselves were responsible for. And now you know the answer to what's the most dangerous creature in the universe. It's regular people, dabbling with something they could never hope to fully understand. Starting with the hope to change the world, only to create monsters that might one day destroy it. Hour 1. There is only one news story on every website, newspaper, and TV screen. The flowers are blooming everywhere, all across the globe. Every country, every landmass. The bitter cold of the Antarctic gives way to a glowing rainbow of petals. The Sahara Desert and Death Valley become beacons of thriving technicolor plant life. The highest mountains, the lowest valleys, the darkest caves. The flowers even burst free from the concrete of cities, as if reminding us that really it was never our world. We were only borrowing it. And today, our lease is up. This is SCP-001. Object Class: Unnecessary. It was foretold by tales from other dimensions, a distant future coming down the tracks towards us. And today, the train has reached the station. Nobody's reporting on how the economy or the stock market is doing today. No point. Celebrity scandals have faded away into nothingness. Greedy businessmen, lying politicians, brutal tyrants, none of them are making the headlines today. The very last headlines. The world gone beautiful. And what a shame. It takes the end of it all to make us realize what really matters to us. That's right. You're looking at the end of the world. But it's okay. Don't panic. Take a deep breath in and out. It was bound to happen eventually, so no point worrying now. Even the Foundation knows that this just isn't something they can stop. So instead of asking things like how can we prevent this or do we have any final tricks up our sleeve, let's ask a different question entirely. What would you do if you knew that you only had 24 hours until all life on Earth ends? Think hard. After all, even if you never live to see the flowers bloom, a final day will still come for you, just as it does for us all. Hour 6. A D-Class sits alone in his cell when he sees the flowers growing out of the ground. Normally he'd assume that this meant he was in some kind of Foundation experiment, but not today. Everyone on Earth had an innate sense that the time is now. A kind of gallows calm spreads out over everyone and everything. It's over, and that's okay. We all knew it was going to happen eventually, right? He sighs and gives a slight smile. Those flowers sure are beautiful. That's when he hears footsteps outside his cell approaching. A key slides into his cell door and opens. There stands Dr. Gears, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Anyone who knows him might think he's been replaced by some kind of shape-shifting anomaly, or had his mind taken over by a powerful cognito hazard. But no, it's him, the famously cold Dr. Charles Ogden Gears. Dr. Gears says, "Come on, it's a lovely day out there. It'd be a terrible waste to spend the whole thing cooped up in here. It'd feel like a trick on any day but this." The D-Class nods and follows the doctor out. The normally oh-so-stoic Foundation senior researcher pours himself and the D-Class each a glass of wine and asks, "What's your name, by the way? I don't think I ever checked." The D-Class replies that his name is Harold. The two smile and chat as they exit the now empty D-Class containment wing. Everyone else is outside already. Researchers, guards, administrative staff, and D-Classes, all rubbing elbows, enjoying the beautiful sun on their last day together. Elsewhere on site, a flock of SCP-514 is released, just as identical flocks are being released from every containment site all over the world. They've prepared it all for this very day. SCP-514 is a special breed of homing pigeons created by the Mana Charitable Foundation, which have the power to suppress aggression for those within their field of anomalous influence. And now millions of them are flying all over the world. After all, there's no point fighting on a day like this. There is no future left to secure. People always told them there would forever be hope until the flowers bloomed. No situation was ever truly over until the world went beautiful. But in the absence of hope, there was something even more inviting. Total, absolute calm. The Site-19 personnel sit together and watch the flowers bloom. Hour 12. All militaries call a global ceasefire. Soldiers from opposing sides hug and shake hands in flowery fields that once seemed choked by death and blood. Borders fade. Bitter rivalries turn to dust. Korea unifies. All is quiet in the Middle East. Gangsters and drug cartels drop their weapons and return home to their families and friends as flocks of SCP-514 fly above. What good is all the blood money in the world on a day like this? Wardens walk cell to cell through all the world's prisons, granting people their freedom again, sometimes after lifetimes of not having it. They taste the air again, feel the sun on their face. They close their eyes, drink it in, and walk among the flowers. Free men. Locations of Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited close their doors and shutter their windows worldwide. For the first time in as long as any of them can remember, they turn their signs to closed. They've earned a day off. Everyone has. The Chaos Insurgency rolls up their plans and burns them. They drop their weapons and throw away their tactical gear. As they do so, they can't help but question themselves. What was it all for in the end? What was any of it for? All the fighting and bloodshed and death. We did it day after day, only to do it again the next day. What silly reasons we killed and died for. What silly reasons indeed. The Global Occult Coalition dismisses its staff, thanking them for their service and telling them to go spend their last hours with the ones they love. Like the Foundation, they accept that this is the one true final end. No ritual to stop, no monster to fight, no evil extra-dimensional entity to thwart. Just go outside and smell the flowers, while you still can. The Serpent's Hand are similar. They decide after decades fighting a losing battle, they'll spend their last day in the Wanderer's Library, reading some of their favorite volumes. All these wonderful stories, now left for other Earths to read. Their own stories would be counted among them in the end, and they take great comfort in that. In a sense, everyone will live forever in the pages of the books in the Wanderer's Library. Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting releases all of its freaks and clowns from their twisted grasp, to go and live out whatever small dreams and tiny pleasures they could find over their last hours. They have no foundation of fear anymore. Nobody minds their strange appearances and odd behaviors. Why would anyone waste such a beautiful day judging others? On the last day on Earth, there's nothing left to prove. Sarcassists drop their ancient flesh-bound tomes, and acolytes of the broken god put down their gilded blades. On the slopes of Siberia, the jungles of Peru, and the most isolated beaches of Mexico, twisted flesh finally touch living metal in the spirit of husbandry. Their eternal war is at its end. In the face of the blooming world, they didn't seem so different after all. The agents of the Dr. Wondertainment Corporation predictably chose to spend their last hours sitting around and playing with toys together. Time well spent, if you ask us. In a highly secretive location, perhaps the most heavily secured place in the entire world, the 13 members of the legendary O5 Council decide to just sit and talk. Anyone who knows anything about this secretive cabal can tell you, the O5 Council has spent a considerable portion of their very, very long lives trying to figure out ways to dodge and cheat death. But now, facing a death they can't dodge, the same calm washing over the rest of the world has finally reached them too. All they can really think this time is, well played, Reaper, well played. As they chat about the kind of inane, casual things that they haven't had time to discuss in years, O5-3 suggests inviting the Ethics Committee over to join. Nobody disagrees. Hour 16. It isn't just the D-classes. All sapient and non-aggressive SCPs have been released from containment, free to spend the last of their time as they wish. Tens of thousands of anomalous individuals are released from containment sites all over the globe. It'd be the greatest victory that the Serpent's Hand could ever ask for, if they weren't all too busy reading to notice. SCP-105 Iris Thompson finally returns to her parents. The Foundation had fed them the lie that their daughter had died many years before, but as Iris had a tendency to do, she was ready to work a miracle. Her parents embrace her with open arms. They'll spend their last hours together catching up on what's happened since they parted ways, and making up for lost time. They couldn't be happier. SCP-1867 Lord Blackwood, the fantastical sea snail, is delivered into a warm rock pool near the site where he was being contained. There he might finally have one more grand adventure before all is said and done. Though afterward, he may not have the time to tell anyone about it. A terrible shame really, because nobody spins a yarn like Lord Blackwood. The non-aggressive little misters run free. Mr. Fish eagerly returns to his native Boston, Massachusetts, where he enjoys one more lobster sandwich before the end of the world. Mr. Headless decides to go hat shopping because he wants to look good for the apocalypse. Mr. Lost finally settles down for the afternoon, deciding that, just this once, he's earned himself a rest. SCP-2800 Cactus Man returns to Edinburgh to spend his last days picking up litter and helping old ladies cross the street. SCP-3663 The Tunnel Monster walks the streets of his hometown, searching for an old friend, hoping to reunite before it all ends. SCP-073 Kane decides to take a walk outside for the first time in thousands of years. He can't help but smile, as the bright, colorful life beneath his feet is growing faster than his presence can kill it. What a truly beautiful day. Knowing that there's no longer time for cults to form and bother him, SCP-2662 Cthulhu decides to take a break from his intense Minecraft session and go take a walk outside. It feels so good to have the sun on his tentacles once more and to feel the lush green grass under his suction cups. He shakes his head, thinking once again about the irritating cults that had been pestering him for decades. What kind of idiot would want him to destroy a world like this? SCP-343, also known as God, sighs and looks over all his creation for what he knows to be the last time. His mouth curls into a smile as he thinks, well, we had a pretty good run. Still in his cell, SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, puts his feet up and decides to relax. The pestilence will soon be taken care of. On some animalistic level, below thought, below even instinct, SCP-096 feels grateful that no gaze will ever fall upon it again. Somewhere fizzling in a vat of acid within a highly secure containment chamber, SCP-682 is feeling, for the first time in its hellish existence, a sense of profound relief. The pain, the hate, the rage, the constant termination attempts, it'd all be over soon. Hour 23. People gather in the streets. They laugh and dance and sing as the moon shines, fat and white, far above. Deep in their hearts, they quietly contemplate the end of all of this. But why worry? Why spoil the fun? There's no future left to worry about. Strangers become as close as family in the end. Human or otherwise, anomalous or non-anomalous. Chaos Insurgency agents have last suppers with ex-Serpent's hands and GOC operatives. There is no hate left, no violence, no malice, no cruelty. The greatest tragedy in all of this is that it took the ultimate end to bring it out in people. But why worry? Why worry? Seconds pass, then minutes. The world buzzes. It hums. Trillions of creatures doing everything they'd wanted, even though it won't last. In the face of the true end, the world has never been more alive. Hour 24. Silence. Forever and ever and ever. Good night. We'll end this video the way it began, by putting a question to you. How would you spend your last 24 hours on Earth? Let us know down in the comments, because it'll happen to all of us, eventually. Say kids, would you like to hear a story? 'Cause we've got a really good one for you. Seriously, you're going to love it. It's a classic rags to riches tale about one man's rise from humble beginnings to become one of history's greatest and most visionary toy makers. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's about a company that literally came from nothing, whose origins are still shrouded in mystery. Maybe it's about a woman breaking the glass ceiling to take over the toy company left to her by her eccentric father. Maybe it's about all of these things. But the one thing we can tell you about the story of Dr. Wondertainment is that every word of it is true. Or at least as far as anything is true in the weird, wonderful world of the SCP Foundation. As long as you believe, we'll all have a wonderful time. As long as you believe, nothing can hurt you. Not in the fabulous world of Dr. Wondertainment. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to his relatively benign nature, has been classified as safe by the Foundation. Rather than focusing on containing Wondertainment himself, the SCP Foundation has centered its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a Class 1 reality warper, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys and games that are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's toys are in the Foundation's possession, such as SCP-445, origami paper that takes on properties of whatever it's folded to look like, and SCP-3147, lollipops that allow people to switch voices with each other. Dr. Wondertainment was born into a family of humble means. His mother was a seamstress and his father was an accountant. Unsatisfied with his mundane life, Wondertainment's only joy growing up was in the stories that his father would tell him about an ancestor of his who was once a famous toymaker. Inspired by these stories, Wondertainment developed an interest in crafting toys, and as an adult set out to learn the secrets he would need to create toys unlike anything the world had ever seen. He spent his life following rumors of magical artifacts and enchanted trinkets until his search brought him to a mysterious factory. If you've seen our previous videos on SCP-001 proposals, you can probably guess that this factory was the factory. The mysterious place where new SCPs are supposedly created. Wondertainment barely escaped the massacre and the Foundation takeover of the factory with his life, but he was able to find a variety of notes that he took with him. These notes contained clues that led him to the workshop of his famous Toymaker ancestor, and from there, he reclaimed his birthright. That was the day that he truly became Dr. Wondertainment. It's a fun story, isn't it? Very straightforward, but perhaps it is a little underwhelming for an SCP-001 proposal. After all, SCP-001 is the collective designation given to some of the most important anomalies of all time, including many that could have potentially been involved in the Foundation's very founding. Let's start again.
Reginald Filbert Lionel Archibald Westinghouse Wondertainment III is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to his highly unpredictable nature, has been classed as Euclid by the Foundation, and he is to be detained as soon as his location can be ascertained. Until he can be captured, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a Class 2 reality warper, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at children and young teens. These products are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as the often imitated but never matched Little Mister's Collection, which are a group of living collectibles with unique anomalous properties. Due to Wondertainment's reality warping abilities, it is impossible to pin down concrete information about his history. What we can tell you for sure is that he's immortal and ageless, and comes from a long line of Wondertainment stretching all the way back to the Cretaceous period, where they made all sorts of toys for the good little dinosaur children. It's also widely known that he is in fact not a real person, but merely the manifestation of the dreams of every child on Earth, brought forth solely by the power of imagination. No confirmed sightings of Dr. Wondertainment have ever occurred, but witnesses have described him as dashing, very handsome for his age, and a lovely chap capable of creating whimsy and wonder with the snap of his fingers. He's a tall man about the height of a piece of string, and he's immediately recognizable by his walking stick and W-shaped mustache. It's also been reported that he has scarring around the circumference of both wrists, almost as if his hands have been removed and reattached at some point. However, the truth of the matter is that… No, we're telling it all wrong again. This doesn't do anything to capture the scope of the Wondertainment story. It needs to feel bigger, more comprehensive. Let's try it again. Dr. Wondertainment is a trademark of the Wondertainment Toy Company, the name given to SCP-001. A corporation that, due to its consistent output of anomalous items, is classed by the Foundation as Keter. Until this company can be permanently shut down, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that it creates. The collective power of the company's constituent employees and the technology they make use are equivalent to that of a Class 3 reality warper. The Wondertainment Company produces and sells a range of products, ranging from the seemingly normal to the downright weird, all imbued with anomalous properties. The company has become infamous for their constant output of bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at children, teens, and young-at-heart adults. These products are made and distributed from Wonderworld, trademark, a location that is yet unknown to the Foundation but offers factory tours every hour from Tuesday to Friday. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as Wondertainment's famous dragon snails, the real fire-breathing pet you can keep in your pocket. Not much is known about the inner workings of the Wondertainment Company. The SCP Foundation has no information currently on the company's leadership structure, location, history, or corporate policies. Various former and current employees have been interviewed regarding their experiences working for Wondertainment, but they never seem to be able to remember very much of use. Those interviewed variously described the Wondertainment Company as a regular office building, an immense toy factory, an amusement park, but all agree it's the best place they ever worked. In fact, you should apply for a job there. They have a few openings in their legal department, or so I've heard. Oh, silly me, it seems we've gotten off topic. You're here to hear about the SCP-001 proposal. Posting a job ad wasn't what I meant to do when I hacked into… well, don't worry about that. Forget I said a thing. Now let's try this again. But this time, we'll add a twist. Isabel Helga Anastasia Parvati Wondertainment V is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to her ability to spread sunshine and whimsy wherever she goes, has been classed as Thaumiel by the Foundation. And due to her immensely unpredictable nature, the SCP Foundation has resolved to just leave her be. Because she can't be captured, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that she creates.
She is a Class 4 reality warper, capable of constructing wonderful, fantastic objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. She's famous and widely beloved for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and not even a little bit dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at everyone from ages 9 to 99. These products are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as SCP-3551, the awesome inflatable alien invaders, and SCP-2514, a lovely horse who can sing Happy Birthday. How grand. Wondertainment inherited the Wondertainment name from her father, who either passed away or never existed at all. The circumstances of his death and perhaps non-existence were very messy, involving a mass murderer, the leader of a shadowy international extra-governmental paramilitary organization, at least one deity, and 4 bent paperclips. She owns 6 corgis, and all of them are named Jeremy. In her free time, she likes to... No, this is all still wrong. All right, enough is enough. You want to know who Dr. Wondertainment really is? Well, you asked for it. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who due to his deity-level power has been classed as Apollyon by the Foundation. There is no possible way to contain him. He is a Class 5 reality warper, capable of breaking down and reconstructing the very laws of reality. Did you really think that those little trinkets were the full extent of his creations? Did you truly think of him as such a small, petty creature? Dr. Wondertainment is no mere toysmith. No, he is a god. Want examples of his creations? Just look around you. Everything from the most innocent safe class to the most harrowing Keter class, it's all thanks to him. He is behind everything. Marshal Carter and Dark, the Sarkists, the Church of the Broken God, even the Scarlet King himself. All that time, all that effort, all it came down to was one entity. One singular living personification of chaos. One day the SCP Foundation will finally give up trying to find out how he distributes his products. When they will finally see how small and worthless their attempts to restore order really are. And they will be driven before his power! They will crumble and decay into nothingness! You will bow before Dr. Wondertainment! Had you going for a second there, didn't we? You should have seen the looks on your faces. But let's start again, one more time. We're being serious this time. Mask off, here's the true story of Dr. Wondertainment. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who due to his relatively benign nature has been classed as neutralized by the Foundation. Rather than focusing on containing Wondertainment himself, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a reality warper whose limits have yet to be documented, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys and games that are distributed by as yet unknown means. Due to his secretive nature, almost nothing is known of Dr. Wondertainment's true origins, and the waters have been muddied extensively by the side effects of his reality warping ability. In fact, it's entirely possible that Dr. Wondertainment himself doesn't know who he is anymore. It's possible that all the proposed origins and descriptions of Dr. Wondertainment are true in their own way, but it is equally possible that none of them are. All that's known for sure is that Dr. Wondertainment, be they male or female, corporation, or single individual, is a constant thorn in the SCP Foundation's side. No matter who they really are, they're not going away soon, and only time will tell who they'll be tomorrow, or what further horrors they and their company will create. And that's where our story will have to come to an end, at least for now. We hope you enjoyed it, and remember, keep believing. Let's get one thing clear. As much as it is fun to go through the various articles on the SCP archive,
we should take a moment to acknowledge that it's all fun and games. The SCP Foundation, all the entities and objects, creatures and people, places and stories related to them are just that, stories. Fiction created by the authors of an online wiki website. It's all designed to be a bit of harmless entertainment. But what if it isn't harmless? What if the characters within the world of the SCP archive somehow knew they had been created by the SCP wiki authors? What would happen if fiction was aware that it was, in fact, fictional? Ask yourself, would you want to know if your world, your life, everything you had ever seen or known was just all fantasy? If the answer is no, then you need to stop watching this video right now, but we'll warn you. Just because you don't know about something doesn't necessarily stop it from being true. Still want to find out what's going on? Good. Then you need to hear about SCP-001. First things first, which of the various SCP-001s are we talking about? Anyone looking for the earliest SCP will quickly discover that there are many different entities and anomalies that share that number. There are a few in-universe reasons for this. One is that all these anomalies were discovered in the earliest days of the SCP Foundation, before their current numbering system was introduced. Then there's the other theories. For example, some have speculated that the existence of many different SCP-001s is an intentional misdirection by the Foundation, their way of keeping the nature of the first true SCP a closely guarded secret. Regardless of what the reason is, the SCP-001 we're looking at today is also known as the database. Any and all information about the database is kept secret from the entire SCP Foundation apart from the Overseer Council. And why is it such a secret? Well, that's because SCP-001 contains details of the very nature of the Foundation itself, including its creation. But we don't mean when and how the organization was founded, or its history. We mean how it was created, and by whom in our reality. Confused? Well, allow us to explain it. At first, the file for SCP-001 describes a group of humanoid entities that have the ability to influence reality. All sounds like pretty standard bread and butter stuff for the SCP Foundation, right? Wrong. These entities are, in fact, the authors of the SCP Wiki themselves, as in the people in the real world. The reality of the SCP Foundation is constantly changed by these writers, written and rewritten whenever someone edits an article on the SCP Wiki. That's all fine and harmless for us, but the Wiki authors' impact on their world is cause of grave concern for the Foundation. As we mentioned at the start, we all know that the SCP Foundation and its vast catalog of user-generated articles on the creative and the creepy are nothing more than a source of fictional online entertainment. It can be fun to study the lore and the nuances of the different SCPs. It can be enjoyable appreciating the creativity and hard work that the authors put into writing them. In the case of fanfiction, independent stories, original SCPs, or even animated videos dedicated to explaining them. It can even inspire and fuel our own written endeavors. But at the end of the day, when all is said and done, we all know that the SCP Foundation is purely fictional. What we don't realize is that the Foundation knows it too. Containing several pieces of information from within their own archive, the database contains everything the Foundation knows about our real world. This includes everything about the real authors of the SCP Wiki, and you thought Deadpool was meta. You see, because the SCP Wiki has articles from numerous different creative writers, chances are the details of every new article might not always line up with every previous one. For a long time, there has been much discussion amongst devoted SCP fans regarding the canon of the website. Now, we don't mean a big gun that launches metal balls. When we say canon, we mean all of the events and stories that are considered to be an official part of the ongoing story of the SCP Foundation. Still with us so far? Because there are so many writers and articles on the wiki, the canon of the SCP archive is a bit inconsistent to say the least. And that's fine for us, because we know none of it is real. It doesn't have to all line up, just as long as a good story is being told. But these inconsistencies, all the little cracks of discrepancy and disparity, are what made the Foundation themselves realize that they are truly living in a fiction.
In other words, SCP-001 is the SCP Foundation's window through what we would experience as the fourth wall. The fourth wall is the metaphorical barrier that separates what we know to be real from what we know to be purely fiction. In other words, it's the line between the audience and the fiction that they are watching, the edge of the stage or the glass of the television screen. And the SCP Foundation is staring through that fourth wall, looking out at you and me. That's right. It isn't just the authors that the Foundation are aware of. It's all of us. According to their own researchers, the Foundation has determined that we, the audience, and the writers exist in something known as the Alpha Layer. What on earth is an Alpha Layer? Well, imagine our reality. The world and the universe as we know it is a slice of bread. It's a strange analogy, we know, but stick with us. Now picture the fictional world of the SCP Foundation as another slice of bread underneath ours. In between the two can be whatever you like, but the point isn't that the world is a sandwich. The point is that we exist on a layer of reality above that of the SCP Wiki, and the filling is just what keeps reality and fiction separate. So as we mentioned, the Foundation is aware of any writers and readers of the SCP Wiki, and this does include you. But the Wiki authors are the primary focus of the database. After all, it's the writers who are responsible for creating the fictional world that the SCP Foundation exists in. Anything that forms a part of the narrative of that world, every article, every tale, every new SCP that gets published, even parts of the Wiki that get taken down or rewritten all have an impact on the Foundation's universe. When the authors link their new SCPs to pre-existing ones, or create connections to a group of interest like the Church of the Broken God or the Global Occult Coalition, their writing ends up making even more of a substantial development to the overall narrative. And all of it ends up in the database. The readers of the SCP Wiki, on the other hand, are a smaller part of SCP-001, mainly because they do not write or publish the content found on the website itself. Anything that is not specifically set in stone by a wiki author can be interpreted in various ways by a reader. A reader's interpretation is a powerful concept and should not be underestimated. Interpretation is the difference between reading Animal Farm as a story about a group of animals rebelling against their human farmer, and understanding it as a satirical and political allegory for the events leading up to the Russian Revolution. So what does interpretation have to do with SCP-001? The point we are getting at is that any unwritten detail or anything that isn't explicitly stated by a wiki author can be changed by a reader's own imagination. This can be anything, from the appearance or personality of an SCP or character, to a detail about the world of the Foundation. And in the same vein, if something in one SCP article contradicts something written in another, the reader is free to choose which of them they accept as part of the universe's true canon. Each reader of the SCP Wiki has their own understanding of the material written there, and inevitably comprehends their own version of the events within. And this is something that the SCP Foundation, even in their world of fiction, is aware of. Or more specifically, the O5 Council is aware of. You see, the secretive overseers are the only ones with any true knowledge of SCP-001. Only they can access the database. Only they know the truth. The fact that they exist in this fictional capacity is something the Overseer Council hopes to hide from the rest of the Foundation's personnel. In an effort to keep the rest of their staff from asking too many questions, the Council has told them that there is currently no way in existence that they could possibly contain SCP-001. But to reassure personnel, the O5s have also stated that this does not pose any risk, nor would it lead to the total and utter destruction of their observable fictional universe. Instead, the Council aims to focus on what they can control, by containing any and all information about SCP-001. Nothing about the database or the truth that it contains is to ever leave O5 Command under any circumstances whatsoever. All of the information about SCP-001, or what it contains, is kept in an encrypted, highly classified form at an unknown location. The key needed to decrypt this data is a passcode split into 3 parts. This key is then memorized by members of the O5 Council, each memorizing a different portion of the passcode. It can only be accessed if every member of the Council unanimously agrees that it is absolutely necessary,
And even when they do decrypt the information about SCP-001, it remains for the eyes of O5 Command, and strictly their eyes only. Any member of the SCP Foundation caught leaking data about SCP-001 is to be contained by any means necessary. This also includes if a member of personnel attempts to get this classified information out via espionage, psychic leakage, or other devious methods. Foundation researchers are even banned from conducting any of their own investigations into the nature of SCP-001 or the data it contains. If a lower-level staff member was somehow to find out the truth, that the entire Foundation is just a fiction, then that person would be at the mercy of the most senior figure on the O5 Council. It would be up to that senior figure to decide the staff member's fate. Anyone with high enough clearance or status within the Foundation who found out about SCP-001 would alternatively be given a Class A amnestic. These are memory-altering drugs that the SCP Foundation uses to keep information about anomalies a secret, apparently even from its own staff. Still, having your mind wiped has got to be better than being killed or contained, just for realizing you're a fictional character on an online wiki. The O5 Council has plans in mind for us, and for the SCP Wiki writers responsible for creating them. The SCP Wiki entry on the database closes with a proposal, a way that the O5 Council can reach out of their fiction directly to the Wiki's authors in the real world. From there, their goal is simple. Through memetic kill agents, the SCP Foundation will put the Wiki authors to sleep and then kill them. Sounds pretty far-fetched, doesn't it? After all, when was the last time something fictional killed someone in our real world? Even more bizarre, what if this kill agent really exists? The O5 Council must have known for a while that their world is fictional, so they've had plenty of time to develop a kill agent, some way of reaching us and the SCP Wiki authors in the real world. Worse still, what if this kill agent is already out there somewhere, lurking on the SCP archive, just waiting for you to find it? And if you read it, how would it kill you? If you don't want to know, then that's your choice to make. But if curiosity is getting the better of you, then remember this. Beware SCP-5999. They came from beyond the world, from over the world, from under the world. They came from inside the stars and from behind the rain. They came from the known lands, and they came from the secret places of old. The vast ones who drank of the nebulae, the small ones who did not care what happened beyond the banks of their rivers, the ones who bathed in the light and the ones who watched from the shadows, the ones who loved us and the ones who forgot about us, the ones who hate us now and the ones who love us still, the ones who sung with the rats and the ones who swam with the leviathans. They came from far and near. They came one and all. They came to end the world. As you may already know from our previous video in this series, a mysterious being known only as the Harbinger unlocked SCP-001 The Lock and brought about the Omnipocalypse. Every single world-destroying XK-class scenario on the books, from Foundation files to the most ancient mythological tomes, and some we'd never even imagined, began to come true. A world flooded with terrifying anomalous activity, from unfurling skies to giant nightmarish animals, was about where we left off. Now it's time to open your eyes and wake up. This is the kind of nightmare you can't encounter while you're asleep. SCP-5720, the astronomically inclined crane, went about its daily work. The small mechanical crane always occupied itself with the one task that gave its existence any meaning: arranging esoteric model solar systems. But something was different today. SCP-5720 put the final touches on its latest model, and then lifted its mechanical arm skywards, pointing directly into the vast and starry infinity above. But were they stars? No, not today. As SCP-5720 looked up at the sky, this time, the sky looked back. They weren't stars, they were eyes. Something was coming towards Earth from the furthest reaches of the outer dark. An armada of world-enders, coming from above, below, and all around. A whole cosmos of supremely powerful beings, zeroing in on our pale blue dot. A thought crossed through whatever passed as the mind of this strange little crane.
Today is the day your prayers will be answered.
Followed by another word, ringing loud and clear and holy as a mighty church bell.
Awaken.
And at that moment, everything did. Thousands of miles away, a new god landed on Earth, appearing like a great wall of dense, matted fur descending from the sky. Ur-An-Um, the mother of the ones that came before. After eons of absence, she had eventually returned to greet her children, the true rulers and stewards of this land. But Ur-An-Um was surprised and horrified by what she saw. Their great cities, their sprawling structures, their beautiful art and advanced culture, all gone, laid to waste by the worthless, hairless apes that once lurked in the forests with the other animals. Something had happened. Something had changed. The humans had slaughtered her people, destroyed their accomplishments, tarnished their legacy, driven the few that were left out of their kingdoms and into the forests, treated them as mere animals, and built their hideous concrete cities over their bones. And they had the gall to call them Bigfoot, or SCP-1000, because thanks to them, their beautiful true name had been lost to time. She looked skywards and cried out in despair and anguish at the loss of her children, inconsolable. But then she felt something, a glimmer of hope in her mind, the possibility that things would change, that the humans would be toppled from their thrones and true justice would be achieved. She called out to her remaining children, and her children answered. Across the globe, another great entity awoke, deep underneath a mountain. When it stirred into life and broke free, it shattered the entire mountain on top of it, as easily as you or me displacing a bedsheet. It took to the skies, massive but unseeable to the human eye. It soared through the air, gazing down upon the world it hadn't seen for thousands of years. Once it had feasted on the blood sacrifices of human subjects hoping to avoid its wrath. But humans weren't the petty little group of huddled cavemen that they had once been. Now they were in their billions, gathered in impossibly large settlements. The entity sought to find a seat of power that it could influence, but now it was spoiled for choice. Eventually, it zeroed in and found its perfect target, an SCP Foundation containment site. Here it would find a new form to take, and more petty, pathetic humans to bring under its mighty thrall. It landed in SCP-765, the Duck Pond. It is an anomalous pond that is, you guessed it, full of ducks, and initially induces feelings of serenity in its victims, before later inducing not-so-pleasant feelings. When the entity plummeted into the water, it began to absorb and bond with the anomaly, growing to epic sizes as it assumed a form that the minds of us feeble humans could comprehend. A giant, terrifying duck. It released a mighty, earth-shaking quack as it plodded across the countryside to cause mayhem elsewhere. In Europe, more violent madness was unfolding. A crimson rooster cawed, then a golden rooster, and then a rooster of soot red. Anyone with a basic knowledge of Norse mythology was shaking in their boots as a mighty beast stirred in the heart of a desolate cave. The chains that had once held the monstrous dog in place now broke. It rose and licked its jagged fangs, excited to stain them with the blood of its enemies. It was the great hound Fenrir, omen of the end times, here to herald the end of all things. A trumpet boomed across the globe with no apparent source. People in the streets in New York, Delhi, London, Cape Town, and countless other towns, cities, and hamlets the world over paused and listened in confusion. Below them, the great and terrible Jormungandr, the thought to be mythological Midgard serpent, stirred from its previously eternal slumber and began to uncoil its body. The shifting caused earthquakes and tsunamis along the coast of Greenland, as towns and villages crumbled, killing thousands. Fenrir stalked along the length of Denmark, slaughtering and devouring anyone or anything unlucky enough to cross its path. But it did not wage its war against mankind alone. Behind it, a hellish army of burning giants marched, mighty hands clutching molten weapons. Ragnarok was upon us now. Odin save us all. And the administrator slept. She was the latest in a long line of Foundation staff members to hold that hallowed position. And in the dark vistas of her dreams, a predecessor approached her. He wasn't the old bearded man in the heavy coat that she remembered. Now he was wearing a 1950s suit and a fedora hat and carrying a briefcase. That's right. He'd taken up the mantle of SCP-990, also known as the Dream Man. He's a mysterious figure that appears to members of the Foundation in their dreams, warning them of impending disasters that they may be able to narrowly prevent if his warning is heeded, though it often comes at some terrible cost to the recipient of his message. This time, however, his message carried a different tone. He told the current administrator that there was no way to stop the apocalypse from occurring this time, only making sure that the particular shape of the apocalypse would be the one most favorable to the Foundation and humanity's joint interests. All this was devastating news that the new administrator saw as a grievous betrayal of both the Foundation's stances and humanity as a whole. She refused to accept the idea that the apocalypse was inevitable, even coming from the mouth of a former administrator. As far as she was concerned, this Dream Man no longer worked on the side of the Foundation. He was in league with the World Enders, and she refused to take his deal. The SCP Foundation would save this world from the horrors the lock unleashed, or they would slide into the darkness with it. They would never work against the human race. SCP-343, also known as God, awoke in his cell in Site-17. The time for fun and games with the humans at the Foundation had come and gone. He was going by his true name, Yahweh now. He blinked, and in that same instant, he was at Site-0, the containment site for another SCP-001, the legendary Gate Guardian. All the staff around them looked upon Yahweh in shock, awed by the Reality Warper's sudden appearance and unable to do anything about it. But really, 343 was no mere Reality Warper, like some had expected. 343 truly was a god. He just didn't happen to be the only one in play. When the Gate Guardian saw Yahweh now standing before him, he lowered his sword, spread his fiery wings, and took a knee in great reverence. Yahweh spoke calmly, but with unshakable authority.
Uriel, it is time. Open the gate. Lead my armies across the earth.
The Gate Guardian Uriel responded in its booming voice.
I hear and obey, my Lord and my God.
For the first time in recorded memory, the Grand Gate that Uriel had always been guarding opened, revealing thousands of legions of warrior angels waiting on the other side. They were impossibly beautiful and powerful creatures, each one a vibrant, glowing chaos of wings and eyes, wielding pure white swords and singing resounding hymns of war. Soon the air was thick with the chorus of rustling wings as the angels loosened themselves from the gate's mouth, led by Uriel as Yahweh's general into the global fray. Meanwhile, back at Site-10, another SCP-001, the item that started all of this, the lock, was entering its next stage of grand cosmic evolution. Something within the lock suddenly unfurled, causing a shockwave that killed everyone at the site and destroying the entire building in an instant. Except in that same instant, all of the Site-10 staff and the building itself reappeared completely unharmed in a field in New Hampshire. Back where Site-10 used to be, the lock was doing some terraforming. The ground split open beneath into a mighty valley, the likes of which Earth had never seen before. Lush greenery sprouted within, and thousands of strange alien creatures soon populated this new place. In the center, the lock just floated in place. They were now ready for the first meeting to take place. Over at Site-2036, Dr. Everett Mann was working on a number of SCP-098 specimens. These are frightening creatures reminiscent of spider crabs, with blades instead of pincers and a natural ability to mimic the sounds of their prey. He was studying the creatures when he got a call, asking him if the specimens had acted up at all. They had already had sudden containment breaches for SCP-995, a type of dangerous carnivorous fungi, and SCP-616, a mysterious airplane with satanic elements to it. Just as Dr. Mann was about to reply, the 098 specimens metamorphosized into many winged flying creatures, which flew out of the chamber with such force that they busted through walls. Sirens blared all through the facility, and Dr. Mann joined the many other confused and frustrated Foundation staff members wandering the building, wondering just what the hell was going on today. They were getting bizarre reports of unprecedented anomalous activity from all over the world, with no explanation uniting it all. According to panicked whispers across the facility, Emergency Order Patmos was now in effect, whatever that meant. The true nature of what was going on here went over most of the heads of the SCP Foundation's staff. That's when Mann encountered Dr. Charles Ogden Gears, who, for such a famously emotionless man, looked surprisingly worried. Dr. Mann tried to downplay the situation, saying they were only looking at a handful of containment breaches here, nothing they hadn't handled before. Dr. Gears shut him down with trademark coldness. Feeling a little more nervous now, Dr. Everett Mann asked what else had gotten out. With steely eyes, Dr. Gears replied,
A whole damn lot.
Now go check out Children of SCP-001, The Scarlet King. Is SCP-999 really his son? And SCP-001 Ouroboros Cycle, the full story compilation for more interesting explanations into SCP-001.